My name is Rock. I'm a second-class private in the Kingdom of Foston. I started serving when I was 14, and now, for years later, I'm considered a veteran. Today is payday, and I'm in a good mood. A second-class private gets 3 silver durliers from the kingdom, plus 2 more that Baron Kadochi personally adds for his soldiers. But the military command always schemes one off the top. That's just how it works. So I end up with 4 silver durliers. I plan to send 3 of them home through the Baron's trade caravan. I want my sister to buy a nice ribbon for her hair instead of wrapping it in rough linen. I want my parents to eat white bread at least once or twice this month. Their health has been getting worse. The last silver durlier I keep to buy drinks for my squad. I lead a 10-man team, 5 third-class privates, and 5 servant soldiers. Most of them are my age, but joined later than me. I always treat them to a drink after payday and after battles. It keeps us tight. In a fight, I need guys who'll watch my back. It works. My squad barely loses people compared to others. We've fought together so many times now that we move like one unit. Around camp, anyone younger than me or about my age calls me Big Brother Rock. I've heard that after the battle 2 months ago, my merit is almost enough to make first-class private. I went to the supply camp to collect my pay. That place sells everything. Good armor, sharp swords, horses, even women. But I can barely afford to look. A basic set of armor costs 100 silver durliers. A decent sword is 10. All I own is a damaged leather vest, a chipped iron sword, an iron spear, and a short dagger hidden in my boot. A big bearded man named Yashak tossed me my pay bag, 3 silver durliers and 100 copper durliers. He's my company commander and comes from the same town as me, or mountain town. He's looked after me since I was a servant soldier. I invited him for a drink this afternoon. He's not just being friendly back, he plans to give me tips on how to get promoted to first-class private. That rank is a big deal. First-class privates receive a combat energy training method from the Baron. It's the path to becoming a knight. Back at our tent, my guys were playing cards and joking around. Kane, our scout, is calm and sharp on the battlefield, but loud and goofy in camp. He and Hans, our shield fighter, are my closest brothers. We've fought together for over 2 years. I told everyone we'd go drinking in the afternoon and to go grab lunch first. Kane tried to talk me into letting him eat my piece of meat. I kicked him and said no. Meals in camp depend on rank. Servant soldiers get bran cakes and potato soup. Third-class privates get black bread and potato soup. I get a wheat cake, a piece of meat, and potato soup. First-class privates eat white bread and meat stew with the Baron himself. Out of 500 soldiers in camp, fewer than 15 get that privilege. I've been looking forward to that white bread for a long time. After lunch, I told my squad that anyone who wanted to send money home should hand it to Hans, and I'd take it to the supply camp caravan. Everyone went quiet for a moment when I mentioned home. It's a sore word for soldiers at war. But most of them nodded and handed over their coins. In other squads, a leader asking for money would cause trouble. Not in mine, because whenever any of my guys needed to borrow money, I never once said no. I wolfed down my lunch. 4 years of war teach you to eat fast, and headed to the supply camp with Hans to send money home. At the post station, I shouted for Warner, the guy who handles mail and deliveries. He stumbled out cursing me for ruining his nap. Warner's got a cushy job. He gets third-class private pay without ever seeing combat. No promotion path, but he's related to the Baron's butler, so he'll probably find his way up eventually. I handed him the money bags, mine and my squad's, and told him not to mix them up. I also asked him to pass a message to my family. Tell my parents to take care of their health, and tell my sister to stop saving every coin and buy herself something nice. I know she'll understand I mean the silk ribbon for her hair. That's something I've been wanting for her for a long time. Warner said the caravan leaves tomorrow. It'll pass through the occupied territory of Petersfield in the Eastern Tier province, then to the capital Floral City, and finally south to our home in Dare province. 20 days at most. On the walk back, Hans and I talked about home. We're not just from the same village. Our families are neighbors. Hans is usually quiet, but mention home and he won't shut up. His brother had another son, making 3 nephews now. The harvest was good this year. The village even slaughtered a pig for the military families. I listened and felt the ache. This war has gone on 4 years. I just want it to end. Back at the tent, almost everyone was napping. I lay down too, but couldn't sleep. I was thinking about how to get promoted to first-class private. The promotion system works like this. Servant soldiers are cannon fodder, anyone fresh from 2 months of training. Third-class privates are the main fighting force. You need a year of service in wartime and the strength to handle 3 servant soldiers. Second-class privates like me lead 10-man squads, 2 years wartime service, and the ability to fight 3 third-class privates. First-class privates are the elite. They command a 100-man company, need 3 years wartime service, and must be able to defeat 3 second-class privates. And they get the right to learn combat energy techniques, the path to knighthood. I know my own strength. In a desperate fight, I can handle 3 guys at my level for a short time. My service record qualifies, but plenty of others in camp are just as strong. 2 months ago, during the battle for Felmer Canyon, our battalion lost a third of its men. The 3rd Company commander and the 4th Company's deputy both died. That opened 2 spots, and a lot of people have their eyes on them. That battle still gives me chills. The kingdom sent 3 legions to take the canyon, a gateway into enemy territory. We threw bodies at it in rotating waves. The defenders were only 1 legion strong, but they fought like cornered animals. I saw badly wounded enemy soldiers, completely surrounded, still attacking with everything they had. They were defending their homeland. I understood them. I remembered what our army did after we beat the Charlo Kingdom's forces last year and took Petersfield. We burned, killed, looted. Families with any wealth were enslaved. Pretty women were taken by nobles or sent to serve as camp women. When I thought about my own parents and sister, I knew, if someone did that to my homeland, I'd fight even harder than those enemies did. I respected those opponents, but I didn't hold back. My brothers were dying too. We belonged to the Eagle Legion, 2nd Infantry Regiment, 5th Battalion. Our 3rd and 4th Companies were the vanguard. When they pulled back, nearly half their men were gone. That terrified the camp, but I pushed down my fear. For years on the battlefield taught me one thing. Fear gets you killed faster. I suggested to Uncle Yashak that our company attack the canyon's flank instead of charging head-on. The terrain there had cliffs and boulders, good cover from arrows and magic. Fewer defenders too. Taking the high ground on the flank would still count as a real achievement. We still lost 2 men. Griff, a 3rd-class private and strong shield fighter. And Gal, a servant soldier, a funny kid, only 16. I personally killed a lightly wounded 2nd-class private, a 3rd-class private, and 5 or 6 servant soldiers. I took a stab wound to my right chest and a bunch of small injuries. My whole squad killed 1 2nd-class private, 5 3rd-class privates, and over 10 servant soldiers. We managed that because we always fought with numbers on our side, and because our squad works well together. Every kill earns merit points. You take the enemy's ID tag and turn it in. A servant soldier is worth 1 point, a 3rd-class private is 5, a 2nd-class private is 10. I've saved up about 50 points now. 100 points can be exchanged for a 1st-class private rank. You can also spend points like money at the supply camp. They're worth more than silver d'Urliers. Or you can convert them to cash, 1 point per silver d'Urlier. Most soldiers cash out their points. The kingdom suffered 2 years of drought. Food prices are sky high, and these men joined the army just to keep their families alive. Money converted from merit points is untouchable by nobles and military command. They can't skim from it. I used to cash out too. But after surviving the bloodbath at Gordon Highlands, I changed my mind. If I die, how can I make things better for my family? The lowest-ranked soldiers die the fastest. Back then, even as a 3rd-class private with some skill, I only survived by hiding among corpses after my strength gave out. After that battle, I got stronger. With the enemy tags I'd collected and Uncle Yashak's support, I became a squad leader and climbed out of the bottom ranks. Now I figure my strength is about average among the guys competing for those 2 open spots. My merit points might not be the highest, but they're definitely higher than most. I've got a real chance at this promotion, and I believe Uncle Yashak will help me. Around 4 in the afternoon, everyone woke up. I couldn't sleep anyway, too hot. I gathered my squad and told them we were going out for drinks. I sent Kane ahead with the boys to the Green Palm Tavern in Giza Town, just outside camp. I told him to get everyone a mug of ale, book a private room, and put it all on my tab. Then Hans and I went to pick up Uncle Yashak. Uncle Yashak teased me about my loud voice and looked Hans over, saying the kid had gotten bigger. Hans proudly said he could take 3 Charlo barbarians now. I joked that Hans only got that big because he eats twice as much as me. Uncle Yashak said soldiers should eat well, then told me I was still too skinny. I'm about 5'9", decent build, 150 pounds. But Uncle Yashak is 6'3" and nearly 300 pounds, so compared to him, I'm nothing. Even Hans is taller and heavier than me. The three of us walked out of camp toward Giza town. It used to be Charlo Kingdom territory. After we took Felmer Canyon 2 months ago, the enemy had no real defenses left. Our 3 legions pushed deep into Charlo land on 3 routes, heading straight for their capital, Otis City, crushing everything along the way. Our Eagle Legion attacked from the south. Resistance was scattered, so the Legion commanders spread us out. The 4 infantry regiments, 20,000 men, broke into battalion-sized groups of about 500, each taking on small towns and villages. Giza town was one of those places. We took it 2 weeks ago. Walking through the streets, I could see burned-out houses and dark-faced beggars everywhere. The locals peeked at us with fear in their eyes. Our standard-issue casual uniforms gave away who we were. War always destroys things, and blood and fire had taught these people to accept us. The owner of the Green Palm Tavern was a clever man. They say he betrayed his own country before our army even arrived. He sold out the town's defenses, personally captured the town mayor, and handed over a large sum of money to win favor with Baron Kadochi. His tavern was probably the only business still running in the whole town, and it served our soldiers exclusively. Soldiers preferred drinking here over the camp supply store for 2 reasons. First, no senior officers came here. The highest rank you'd see was a squad leader. So guys could talk freely, joke, gamble, and drink without watching their mouths. Second, everything was cheap. The Charlo currency was nearly worthless now, and our d'Urlier was king. A big mug of ale cost just 1 copper d'Urlier, half the camp price. The tavern also had another business. The war had left many local women desperate and hungry. Some came here willingly, some were forced into it. But with no law established in occupied territory, nobody cared. The prices were low, the women were new faces, and no amount of military discipline could stop soldiers from coming. The officers looked the other way. This kind of thing was common in occupied areas. Charlo civilians couldn't farm because of the war, so they had nothing to eat. They sold what they had themselves. When we walked in, the smell of sweat and noise hit us immediately. The place was already packed with familiar faces. Everyone nodded and smiled at each other. Uncle Yashak got even more attention. As one of 4 company commanders in our battalion, he was a real authority figure. Soldiers crowded around to greet him. He just gave them brief nods. Kane's voice cut through the noise. He and the boys had grabbed tables in the corner. Full mugs sat untouched. They'd been waiting for us. I told them to start drinking and sent Kane to get Hans a mug too. Then I told Hans to stay with the squad while I went upstairs with Uncle Yashak. I called Yashak Uncle on purpose where everyone could hear. It showed people I had a special relationship with a company commander. In the military, connections matter. A small thing like that raises your standing without saying a word. And anyone paying attention could guess what a squad leader and a company commander would be discussing privately right after payday, promotions. I noticed a few soldiers nearby changed their expressions when they heard. On the way upstairs, I nodded to the tavern owner's wife at the front desk. A woman named Xiaoshi with red wavy hair. She was still attractive. She flashed a flirty look back. Charming woman, I thought. Upstairs there were 5 or 6 private rooms. I unlocked ours. It was small, maybe 200 square feet, with a window looking out at green mountains in the distance. A table sat by the window with a couch on each side. A simple but nice-looking screen stood by the door next to a small coat rack. On the table were 2 glass cups and 2 bottled Alesh with glass bottles and oak stoppers. The room felt comfortable. I'd been here once before, and even though I've never been the fancy type, drinking here made me feel like I had some class. That tavern owner's wife knew how to run a business. Uncle Yashak came in, hung up his jacket, and sat down on one of the couches. I did the same. Neither of us rushed to talk. I opened a bottle of ale, poured his glass first, then mine. We clinked glasses, drained them, and only then got down to business. You've gotten more steady over the years, Uncle Yashak said. It was funny. Everyone outside saw him as a loud, straightforward brute, but here he was teaching me about being calm and measured. He's not as simple as he looks. I asked him straight, do I have a chance at this promotion? He told me he's watched over me since my first day as a servant soldier for years ago. He thinks of me like his own son and promised to help. I believed him. I see him as family too. But I knew his support alone wouldn't be enough, so I asked what else I needed to do. He explained how the voting works. 2 company commander spots are open. The people who get a say are the 6 commanders and deputy commanders from the 4 infantry companies, the cavalry captain, Baron Kadochi himself, and the Baron's eldest son, Solon, who serves as deputy cavalry captain. The Baron and the cavalry captain won't get involved in this vote. So it comes down to 7 people, the 6 infantry leaders and young Master Solon. Uncle Yashak already secured 2 votes for me, his own and Old Karl's, his deputy. Old Karl is a strict, serious veteran, but he's fair and good to his men. I like him. That means I still need at least 2 more votes. I told Uncle Yashak where I stand. I have a small connection with the 1st Company's deputy commander, but no relationship at all with the 3rd Company's deputy or the 4th Company's commander. Those last 2 were supposedly recovering from injuries, but Uncle Yashak scoffed at that. The hard fighting is over, and those 2 couldn't resist going out to roam with their men after just 2 weeks of rest. Roaming is our word for raiding villages still under Charlot control. It's barely real combat. Most villages only have militia and a few brave farmers. A single company can handle them easily. Our company does it too when we have time. The real targets are towns, which have merchants, wealthy farmers, even nobles. The Baron and his cavalry don't bother with small villages. That's where us infantry make our extra money. The Baron's caravan buys whatever we take. Silver bracelets passed down in families, animal pelts, horses, cattle, donkeys. Soldiers keep nice clothes and shoes for themselves. We have one rule: we don't take food. Command strictly forbids it. Grabbing a couple of chickens for a better meal, though, that's normal. I'm a farm boy. Part of me used to feel ashamed about taking from ordinary people. But after years of war, watching friends die, I don't know how I feel about these Charlot civilians anymore. There's hatred, and there's guilt. But none of that stops me from making money. I need to survive. I need my family and my squad to live better. A while back I was flush with cash from roaming, sending money home and treating my boys to drinks. I asked Uncle Yashak if we'd be moving out soon, since we hadn't roamed in about a week. He said yes, it's already decided. Baron Kadochi is joining forces with Baron Kashir's 7th Battalion to attack the nearby city of France. That's why they need the 2 new company commanders chosen soon. Plus, there are no worthwhile villages left around here. Cities have walls and moats, so our 500 men can't take one alone. We always team up with another battalion for siege battles. We've done 3 city assaults since entering Charlot territory 2 months ago. Siege warfare costs lives, but what you earn after breaking through the gates makes the risk worth it. On the day a city falls, command lets soldiers help themselves to whatever they can find. That's where the real money is. We kept drinking and talking. The first bottle was empty, so I opened the second and poured for both of us. Uncle Yashak said the 1st Company's deputy commander is also from our hometown or mountain town. He has some connection with the guy. If I send a gift and Uncle Yashak puts in a word, we might lock down that 3rd vote. But the remaining 3 voters, he doesn't know them well and even has friction with some of them. That part would be up to me. Then he added something interesting. He suggested I try approaching young Master Solon. We're close in age, both 18 or 19. I could show loyalty or bring a gift and maybe win him over. But Uncle Yashak warned me. If I go that route, I'd become Solon's man from then on. Baron Kadochi has more than one son. The kingdom follows firstborn inheritance, but his other sons aren't without a chance at the title. His second son is managing the family's territory back home right now. I sighed and asked what kind of gift a common soldier could give that would impress a noble. Uncle Yashak just laughed and said he knew I'd figure something out. He'd done all he could. The rest was on me. I raised my glass. We clinked and drank. After a few more rounds, the ale loosened us up and we started talking about home. I could tell Uncle Yashak was missing his 2 sons. He kept slipping into fatherly advice, teaching me how to carry myself. I appreciated it and kept toasting him as a junior should. I remember his sons. When Uncle Yashak left to join the army, his older boy took over the blacksmith shop. His younger son was just a helper there. But that younger kid made my first weapon, a short dagger. That dagger has a story. I was 14 when I snuck away from home to enlist. All I had was that tiny blade, barely bigger than my palm. No proper handle, just rough linen cloth wrapped around the end. I hid it in my boot. My parents didn't know I was leaving. Only my sister Leah knew. That hot night, I crept out of bed, grabbed my linen clothes, put on my straw sandals, and slipped out of our thatched hut. Leah caught up with me in the dark. She knew exactly why I was leaving. Our family was starving from the drought. Father was too old and sick to answer the Baron's call to serve. I was barely old enough. If I didn't go, my parents would starve, and Leah would be sold to a merchant. Once the army accepted me, I couldn't leave. That would make me a deserter, and my family still lived here. So even when my parents found out, they'd have no choice but to accept it. Leah cried. Tears soaked her thin face. I can handle anything. Pain, fear, hunger, but I can't stand watching my sister cry. I love her more than I love myself. After I calmed her down, she searched every pocket and fold of her clothes and pulled out about 20 copper duriers. That was everything she had. She looked at me and said, "Come back alive." I walked all night and reached our mountain town by dawn. I went to the blacksmith shop hoping to buy a weapon, but the owner, Uncle Yashak's older son, told me 20 coppers couldn't even buy a sword handle. As I walked away disappointed, a kid my age ran out from the shop. He offered me a deal. For 20 copper duriers, he'd forge a dagger from leftover copper and iron or scraps. He pointed at some small yellow-brown and reddish stones by the door. I had no choice. I needed a weapon. Going to the army empty-handed meant being pure cannon fodder. So I got my first weapon, a short dagger with no sheath and no real handle. With that tiny blade, and my age barely meeting the minimum, I enlisted. The sight of a scrawny kid showing up with a palm-sized knife became the camp's joke for days. I wouldn't have been accepted without someone vouching for me, but Yashak, then a squad leader at the town garrison, recognized me. Our town and its surrounding villages only had about 1,000 people total. Everyone knew everyone. The next day, my parents rushed to town with Leah. They saw me training with the other recruits. My father and mother could only sigh through their tears and accept reality. They left me 3 big bran cakes. I knew that was all the food they had left. For the next 6 months, they'd probably survive on tree bark. Before leaving, Leah unwrapped the linen cloth from her hair and gave it to me. She said again, "Come back alive." That evening, I watched my sister help my parents, who seemed to have aged years in a single day, walk down the road back to Maple Leaf Village. I held that strip of linen, still carrying the scent of her hair, and carefully wrapped it around my dagger's handle. I wanted her love to fight alongside me. I swore I would come back alive. During 2 months of training, I pushed myself harder than anyone. My young age was a disadvantage in strength, but an advantage in recovery. That's also when I discovered that Hans, the neighbor kid I used to play with, had enlisted too, though he joined just to get a full stomach. That dagger is a record of my journey. My army-issued iron sword broke in my very first battle. I killed my first enemy with that little blade, a Charlot servant soldier, about 14 or 15, the same age as me. I threw up for a whole day afterward. From his body, I took a spear and a pair of short boots. Battle after battle, weapons broke and got replaced, broke again and got replaced again, until I ended up with what I carry now. But the dagger never broke. Maybe I took good care of it. Maybe Uncle Yashak's younger son was a better smith than anyone gave him credit for. The linen wrapped around the handle has lost its original color. It's blood red now, my blood and enemy blood mixed together. Sometimes I take the dagger out and stare at it. From that rough cloth, I swear I can still smell my sister's hair. The ale made Uncle Yashak think of his sons. It made me think of my dagger, my sister, my parents. We drank cup after cup until the second bottle was nearly empty. The ale here isn't great, but it has a slow kick. Not enough to get us drunk, but enough to make us sentimental. After the last cup, Uncle Yashak said we should go. It was almost dinner time. The tavern doesn't serve food, and we needed to get back to camp. He had to eat with the Baron and the other commanders. I had evening patrol inspection to deal with. As we left the room, we were both still low from thinking about home. But Uncle Yashak is an old hand. He shook it off fast and cracked a joke to lighten the mood. He asked if I was still a virgin at 18 and said the tavern owner's wife seemed like a fine choice, winking at me. I laughed and told him to stop. A woman like that wouldn't look twice at someone like me. Her husband was resourceful enough to get an audience with the Baron. Uncle Yashak snorted. He called the tavern owner a clown and an opportunist. The Baron doesn't actually respect the man. Just a pitiful guy, I thought. Then the image of that curvy, red-haired woman drifted back into my mind. Maybe it was the alcohol, but I felt a sudden warmth. I'm not actually inexperienced. In my second year of service, after surviving a big battle and making third-class private, I'd saved a little spending money. My buddies dragged me to the supply camp, and I had my first time there. For some reason, I've always been most attracted to women older than me. Not that I'd ever admit that out loud. Deep down, I know, of all the women I've ever seen, the most beautiful is my sister. But every time that thought crosses my mind, I force myself to snap out of it. I followed Uncle Yashak downstairs. At the staircase turn, I caught a glimpse of the tavern owner's wife leaning over the counter doing her accounts. The view from my angle was distracting. I nearly tripped down the stairs. It was almost evening. The sunset painted everything orange through the tavern curtains. Most soldiers had already left. Only my squad and a few stragglers remained. Uncle Yashak said goodbye to the remaining soldiers, told them not to drink too much, and headed back to camp. I turned to check on my boys. Most of them were my age or younger, and their drinking ability was far worse than mine. Hans and Kane were still lively, but Yad, Phil, and the others were slumped over their tables with flushed faces, mumbling nonsense. Each of them had only 2 or 3 empty mugs, roughly 1 bottle's worth. The first round was on me. The rest they paid for themselves. They'd waited too long while I was upstairs talking and couldn't help ordering more. I scolded them for drinking beyond their limit and told everyone to get up. We needed to get back for dinner and evening patrol. Kane and Hans tried to drag me down for another round, but I waved them off and promised I'd treat everyone again another day. My guys started pulling each other to their feet. Just then, about 15 or 16 ragged, thin local men walked into the tavern. They looked like townspeople, Charlot civilians. The leader, a middle-aged man, was about to say something when he spotted us in the corner. Our military uniforms gave us away. He swallowed his words and went tense. His group fell silent too. I had no interest in them. I went to the counter to settle my tab. 10 mugs of regular ale at 1 copper d'Urlier each, plus 2 bottles of better ale for another 10 coppers. 20 copper d'Urliers total. A good deal. I slapped the coins on the counter. I heard throats swallowing behind me. Those ragged men were staring at the money on the counter. 20 coppers was serious money here. This tavern probably made about 30 coppers on a good day. What I just paid was nearly a full day's earnings. The owner's wife glanced nervously at the group of men, then smiled at me and said I was welcome back any time. I nodded and led my squad toward the door. But the moment we stepped outside, I heard muffled shouting in a heavy Charlot accent coming from inside, and a woman crying and begging. I turned around. 4 or 5 of those men had blocked the tavern entrance, trying to hide what was happening inside. That made me angry. These skin-and-bones peasants dared to block my view. They weren't being disrespectful to me directly, but standing in my way was enough. I fixed them with a cold stare. One by one, they wilted and shuffled aside, opening a gap. Through it, I saw one of the stronger-looking locals wrestling a bundle away from the owner's wife. She was crying and pleading with the middle-aged leader, but he just stood there unmoved. A few scrawny young men nearby were excitedly counting copper coins in their hands, the money I had just paid. "What do you think you're doing?" I said in a cold voice. Everything went quiet. My squad heard my tone and turned back immediately. Drunk or not, they were soldiers. They sobered up fast, saw what was going on, and started rolling up their sleeves. The owner's wife stopped crying and looked at me. I knew she recognized me. I'd been here a few times. She knew I had some standing in the camp. The middle-aged leader finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "Sir, this is an internal matter of Giza town. Is there something you need?" I narrowed my eyes and walked slowly back into the tavern. My squad followed. Kane and Hans kicked the men guarding the door out of the way. They yelped and scattered. I walked up to the man who'd been grabbing the owner's wife's bundle. I'm 5'9", but this hunched, malnourished guy was shorter and clearly intimidated. His hands trembled and let go. The bundle tore open. About 30 copper coins spilled across the floor, along with some women's clothes. The owner's wife's belongings. I slapped him hard across the face. He spun and tumbled across the floor. Then I turned to the leader. "Sir, you," he started. I slapped him too. This one was tougher and didn't fall, but I knocked out a few of his teeth. He doubled over, clutching his face. Those 2 slaps were the signal. My boys went to work. Yad kicked a young man holding stolen coins to the ground. Hans grabbed 2 scrawny guys like a bear and smashed them together. Cain picked 2 men and slapped them back and forth from start to finish, copying me. Even little Phil grabbed someone his size and started pounding him in the chest. The rest followed their lead. The whole group of locals got beaten until they were crying for mercy. Within moments, every one of those locals was on the ground. Only my squad, the owner's wife, and I were still standing. I walked over to the leader, stepped on his back, and asked who gave him the nerve to steal money that belonged to Foston Kingdom soldiers. Because that's what it was. Every coin this tavern earned came from our troops. He begged for mercy, blood dripping from his mouth. Since he admitted his mistake and my boys had already given them a thorough beating, I let it go. The Baron's rules are strict. We can't go too far with civilians. I kicked the guy one more time and told him to get lost. He scrambled out with his group, and the tavern went quiet. The owner's wife was still frozen in shock. I cleared my throat to snap her out of it. She stammered out a thank you, clearly still frightened. I told her it was nothing and waved for my squad to head out. It was almost completely dark, and the camp torches were already lit. I hoped they'd saved us some dinner. My guys filed out. I was last to leave when I heard soft crying behind me. The owner's wife was slumped over the counter, sobbing quietly. I can never handle a woman crying, especially a pretty woman older than me. I told my squad to go ahead and walked back to the counter. I patted her shoulder and said, "Stop crying. Tell me what's wrong. I'll help." She cried harder. I had no idea what to do. I can deal with enemies. I can deal with thugs. But a crying woman? I'm hopeless. I may not be completely inexperienced with women, but comforting one? You can't expect that from a guy who's spent his whole adult life in a military camp. Meanwhile, my squad disappeared into the distance suspiciously fast. Those guys clearly thought this was my moment alone with a beautiful woman after playing hero, and they weren't about to get in the way. Very disloyal of them. So there I was, stuck in an awkward silence, sitting stiffly while she cried. Leaving felt wrong. She was still upset. Staying felt strange. A grown man watching a woman cry with nothing to say. Anyone passing by would think I'd done something terrible to her. Eventually her sobs faded. She peeked at me sitting there with my frozen face and suddenly let out a small laugh. That's when she seemed to realize I was actually younger than her, just a boy underneath my steady, tough exterior. That laugh broke the tension. It wasn't her usual business smile. It was playful and genuine, and something stirred in my chest. She blushed, lowered her head, and thanked me again. I mumbled that it was fine. I didn't say goodbye. My instinct told me not to leave yet. Dinner at camp was probably long gone anyway, and my squad could cover for me during night inspection. We just stared at each other awkwardly. Then I noticed something and started grinning. She followed my eyes to the side of the counter. Her underwear and clothes were still scattered there from when the bundle had torn open. She shrieked, dove at the pile, and tried to cover everything with her body. But leaning over like that, her loose top couldn't contain her figure, and I got an eyeful. Before I could stop myself, 2 words slipped out. So big, she screamed again and grabbed clothes to cover her chest, which only exposed the rest of her laundry. She was like a startled rabbit, trying to hide herself and her clothes at the same time. It was adorable. After a frantic scramble, she finally gathered everything up and clutched her arms over her chest, even though she was standing upright now and there was nothing to see. Well, if everything's fine, it's late. I should head back to camp, I said, not knowing what else to do. She started to thank me again, but my stomach growled loudly before she could finish. I wanted to disappear. She asked if I'd eaten dinner yet and offered to cook something. The shrewd businesswoman was back. She wanted to stay on good terms with someone who had connections in the camp, and she genuinely wanted to repay me. I said yes, but told her to keep it simple. I wasn't being polite. I knew the reality for Charlot civilians in occupied territory. Most couldn't eat their fill. Even running a tavern, she was getting shaken down by local thugs. She probably wasn't doing much better than anyone else. She walked to the front entrance and slid a wooden board across the doorway to close up for the night. Then she headed to the back kitchen, hips swaying as she went. I noticed her face was flushed the whole time, like a beautiful older woman sneaking around for a secret meeting. Tempting. Though, of course, nothing secret was actually happening. While she cooked, I got down on the floor and gathered up all the copper coins that had spilled earlier. It was dark with no light, So I had to rely on the night vision I'd trained over years of soldiering. That's probably why she'd only grabbed her clothes before and left the money. She couldn't see them in the dark. When I finished picking up the coins, Xiaoxi came out of the kitchen carrying 2 plates. She set them on a table, then found a candle stub, barely the size of a thumb, and lit it. The tavern brightened just a little. She noticed the re-wrapped bundle and the cleaner floor. A grateful look crossed her face. "Come eat," she said. I looked at the 2 plates of black mush and couldn't hide my surprise. I said keep it simple, but this is really simple. It was mashed roasted potato with a bit of salt. I used to eat this as a kid when times were hard. She turned red and apologized. It was the only food she had. She looked ready to cry again. So I quickly backed off and said I hadn't had potato mash in a long time, and it would be like old times. Honestly, as someone who now gets meat at every meal, going back to this was rough. But I was starving after an afternoon of drinking with nothing to eat. So I grabbed the plate and wolfed it down. I was curious about her situation. That tiny candle alone could be traded at camp for a full meat dinner. Candles were luxury items, mostly used by nobles. Even Uncle Yashak only had an oil lamp. My squad used torches. She ate delicately, 1 small spoonful at a time, like she was savoring a feast. Her portion was half the size of mine, and I finished long before her. She pushed half of what she had left onto my plate. I didn't argue. After we both finished, I asked her straight, how did things get this bad? With her business, it shouldn't be like this. She told me the truth. The tavern brings in about 30 copper duriers a day, sometimes 50 on a good day, but almost none of it stays with her. The local thugs take it. Like today, I asked why her husband didn't handle it. He had connections with our camp's leadership. 1 word from him, and someone would deal with those thugs. Her face fell. She said her husband abandoned her. After he betrayed his town and gained power through our army, he became the most important man in Giza. Refugees and locals all bowed to him. He had no shortage of women now. He ran the group of women selling themselves behind the tavern. He gave Xiaoxi the tavern as some kind of compensation and never looked back. At first, the thugs were afraid of her husband's name and the soldiers who drank here. But as they got hungrier and realized her husband didn't care about the tavern anymore, they grew bolder. They came every time the last soldier left and took whatever they wanted. I asked why she didn't ask a soldier for help. Someone like me would step in. We still needed a place to drink. She said help would only last a day. The thugs would come back worse. Her ale supply was running out. All old stock, no money to brew new batches. In less than a week, she'd have nothing left to sell. She'd end up like the women behind the tavern. I saw through it. You don't just want me to teach those thugs a lesson once. You want me to protect you permanently. She blushed and bit her lip, then nodded. I told her the truth. I'm just a squad leader with 10 men. We have training duties. I can't station people here full time. And we could be marching to battle any day. Even if I protect her now, what happens when I leave? I'm not the kind of man whose brain stops working because a pretty woman asks for help. I had to be realistic. Her face went pale. The candle had burned down to nothing. Its last flicker died, and the tavern went dark. Moonlight crept through the window cracks, casting us both in pale white light. She started crying again, soft, broken sobs. This poor woman had probably cried more tonight than in the past year. She had no idea what her future held. I felt for her, but I couldn't change the facts. There's no love without reason in this world. I can't even guarantee my own survival, let alone take care of a stranger. But her crying got to me. I sighed and offered what I could. I'd send a few of my guys to watch the tavern for several days. She could do business in peace, save up what she earned, and then leave, head to Petersfield in the occupied zone, or find relatives somewhere. That's all I can do, I said, and stood up to leave. It was getting late, almost time for camp lockdown. She cried harder. I walked toward the door. I wasn't going to keep comforting her. Sometimes people need to cry it out before they can get stronger. Her sobs faded as I reached the entrance. I was about to push aside the wooden board blocking the door when a warm body pressed against my back, arms wrapping around me. I can't let you help me for nothing, she said, her voice raw. All I have is this tavern and a few barrels of leftover ale. The only thing I can give you is myself. I can't think of another way to repay you. I could hear it in her voice, gratitude mixed with despair, the recklessness of someone who's hit rock bottom. You don't have to do this. I started to say. She kissed me before I could finish. Her lips were hot and urgent against mine, her arms tight around my chest. I'm not made of stone. It had been nearly a month since I'd been with a woman. Her passion hit me like a spark on dry wood. I kissed her back, hard, then lifted her up in my arms. Not here, she whispered, barely coherent. Upstairs. I carried Xiaxi upstairs. She pointed me to a room at the end of the hall. I kicked the door open, tossed her onto the big bed, and things happened fast from there. Afterward, the room was quiet except for our breathing. Moonlight came through the window and lit up her flushed face as she lay against my arm. She looked beautiful. I felt relaxed for the first time in a while. I thought about the cigar Uncle Yashak keeps in his drawer, a gift from the Baron. He lights it after meals, takes a puff or two, then saves the rest. Right now, a cigar would make this moment perfect. She curled up against my chest, soft and warm. I'm not a cold-hearted man. Before tonight, I had no reason to help her beyond what I already did. But now that we'd been together, I couldn't just walk away and let her end up on the streets. I needed to figure something out. While I was thinking, she noticed me frowning and said quietly not to worry about her. She'd sell what ale was left, make some money in a week, and take it to the occupied territories to find work. Without thinking, I blurted out the truth. 2 silver coins in a week wasn't enough for anything. The occupied zone of Petersfield was flooded with Charlo merchants and wealthy families trying to buy Foston citizenship. Even Charlo nobles were defecting. Prices there were as high as a major city. Her money would last maybe a week. She went quiet and held me tighter. I realized my words had hurt her, so I softened up. I told her I'm not the kind of man who uses a woman and walks away. I'd help her. Her eyes lit up. Really? Really? I'm working on it. She was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. She told me she hadn't been treated this well in years. Every man who ever showed interest wanted her body or her money. She said she wanted to be my woman, not just for one night, but for real. I looked at her. I'm just a common soldier with no real power or wealth. Before this, if I wanted a pretty woman, my only options were the supply camp or my dreams. I held her tighter and said, "Are you sure? I could die in battle any day." "Don't say that," she shot back. "If you die, I'll bury you and spend the rest of my life as your widow." We'd only known each other for a day, but she'd made up her mind. "The man who can kill me hasn't been born yet," I said with a grin. "I've survived every major battle. I'm not going to slip now." We lay there talking about our pasts. I learned her full story. Xiaxi is 23, born in this town. Her parents died of illness when she was small. She has one brother who's still alive. Growing up with just the 2 of them, she learned to take care of herself early, selling wooden furniture her brother made, working odd jobs at an inn. She picked up reading and basic math along the way. At 17, a matchmaker introduced her to the tavern owner, and she married him. But war broke out less than a year later. For years of fighting and poverty crushed her dreams of building up the business. Her husband never really cared for her, and eventually he threw her aside completely. She figured her life was just going to fade away like that. Hearing her story stung. She'd had it worse than me. At least I have parents and a sister who love me. At least I'm a man who can fight. How did this woman carry so much weight alone? I promised her I wouldn't let her down. Then I told her about myself. 18 years old, from Maple Leaf Village in Kadochi Territory, Dare Province. Loving parents, a sister I adore. For years as a soldier. When she heard I'd been in the army since 14, she was shocked, then understood why someone so young could already be a squad leader. But the age gap bothered her. She'd known I was younger, but 5 full years younger? She groaned inside about that. I didn't care. I started calling her she, to be affectionate. She protested. Only her brother and her aunties called her that when she was little. She said it felt weird coming from someone younger. I told her I was her big brother now, and the name was staying. She gave in. What impressed me most was that she could read and do math. I'm completely illiterate. I can barely write my own name. Simple addition is fine, but anything more complicated and I'm lost. My assessment of her, a woman starved for love, but sharp and capable. So after thinking it over, I decided to tell her about my promotion problem. Because I realized only one thing could fix both our situations. I had to become a first-class private and company commander. Only officers at that level could afford to keep a woman during wartime without being mocked for it. I told her everything. The election for 2 company commander spots, the upcoming attack on France City in about a week, who had voting power, where I stood. She was startled at first, then quickly focused. She understood. I was trusting her completely. I was treating her as my own. And I made it clear. Only if I get this promotion can I protect her in this war-torn world. She stepped right into the role. She asked detailed questions about the camp's leadership structure and my connections. I answered everything. None of it was classified. Anyone with some effort could find out the same things. After hearing it all, she cut straight to the point, same as Uncle Yashak had. Go after young Master Solon. Xiaxi laid it out clearly. Our battalion is led by Baron Kadochi. Even the battalion commander is one of the Baron's knights. If I want to climb higher, I need to get close to the Baron. Military merit, promotions, it all comes down to one word from him. So the path is through young Master Solon. He's the Baron's eldest son and likely heir. If I pledge loyalty now while his inner circle is still small, I could earn his trust and support early on. Xiaxi went further. She said since the Baron and the battalion commander aren't participating in the company commander election, Solon is the real power behind it. She even guessed that the whole election might be the Baron's way of letting Solon build his own team. I remembered something Warner once told me, that the third and fourth companies might merge into one, with a brand new company formed alongside it. I'd laughed it off as gossip, but now it clicked. A fresh company with no existing leadership would be the perfect place for Solon to install his own people. I got so excited I kissed Xiaxi on the spot. When I told her the merger rumor, she grew even more certain. I asked why the Baron would build Solon's team so early, especially when his second son was managing the territory back home. Xiaxi told me not to overthink things above my station. She said what matters is climbing up, so our future is better. When she said, our future, something warm hit me in the chest. I held her tight and told her our life would be good. I woke up late the next morning. Last night had been energetic. I slapped my face to wake up and headed for camp. Xiaxi and I had agreed on a plan. I'd approach Solon, and for a gift, she said not to bring anything expensive or flashy. I'm just a squad leader. Showing up with luxury goods would look suspicious. Better to bring something honest that fits my position. It shows sincerity without pretension. From what I'd seen of Solon in camp, he wasn't the type to care about material things. So I chose 2 bottles of the better ale from Xiaxi's tavern, the same kind Uncle Yashak and I drank. She only had 5 bottles left and needed ingredients to brew more. 2 bottles felt right. Back at our tent, I could hear the noise from far away. Peter, a young servant soldier and Kane's apprentice archer, was on guard duty. He shouted my name when I appeared, nearly startling me. Inside, I heard Kane's loud voice before I even entered. I bet Big Brother Rock is still in that tavern owner's wife's bed, plowing the field. He hadn't heard Peter's warning. I crept up behind him. Everyone else saw me, and their grins froze. Kane's scout instincts kicked in just in time. He dove forward to dodge my sweep kick, then rolled sideways to avoid my stomp. My foot hit the ground hard enough to raise dust and make a thud. Not bad reflexes for an archer. Easy, boss. I was just joking, he yelped, knowing he couldn't beat me in a fight. I let it go. Then I gave my orders. For the next few days, after training, Yad would take Phil and a few of the servant soldiers to the Green Palm Tavern to keep watch. My squad understood the layers in that order. First, me stationing men at a tavern in town was beyond what a squad leader should do. It signaled I was confident about my coming promotion. Second, saying, these few days, hinted we'd be moving out soon. Third, protecting the tavern owner's wife after I'd been gone all night told them exactly what happened between us. They'd be guarding their leader's woman. That kind of trust pulls a squad closer together. I sent Yad and the servant soldiers instead of my best fighters on purpose. The camp still has inspectors watching, and I can't overreach as a squad leader. Plus, those newer guys needed toughening up. Most of them were farmers a year or 2 ago. Roughing up some local thugs would be good practice. Last night they'd fought well, but that was with me and Kane leading the charge. On their own, they needed to build that confidence. The veterans in my squad caught every unspoken meaning. The newer ones would hear about it from Kane later. That's how I lead. I share what's coming so my guys can prepare, and I show them I'm moving up, which makes them believe in our squad's future. Around 3 in the afternoon, I walked to the center of camp carrying the 2 bottles of ale. This was where the Baron, the battalion commander, and Solon lived. Solon's tent had at least 2 squads of guards outside, and those were just the ones I could see. I asked a guard to announce me and waited. After a routine search, I was let in. This was my first time inside Solon's tent. I'd barely spoken to him before, just respectful greetings when we crossed paths in camp or on the battlefield. My impression of him was good. He's strong, approachable for a noble, and doesn't look down on common soldiers. He fights alongside us. He's trained in combat energy, a real fighter. I figure at my current level, the best I could manage against him is a draw. That alone says something. Holding my own against someone with combat energy training, without having any myself, is like fighting above my weight class. Of course, Solon grew up learning his family's techniques, while the Baron would never let his heir face real danger. My strength was forged in blood and death, so matching him makes sense, even if we got there by very different roads. Solon's tent was about 10 square meters, filled with expensive things I'd never seen up close. A red miniature tree in a pot, pearls hanging from a metal frame, a gray-brown bear skin, a carved wooden eagle in mid-flight. Some of it I recognized as valuable. The rest was probably worth even more. At the front stood a polished, orange-red wooden desk. A large screen blocked the view of what I guessed was his sleeping area. A young man stood behind the desk, watching me. He had black hair, a tall build, and pale red eyes. A mark of the noble Sandrew Marquis bloodline from the capital. Solon recognized me. I have to admit, standing there with messy gray hair, worn-out leather armor, and 2 bottles of ale in my hands, I probably looked ridiculous. But after a moment, something like curiosity flickered in his expression. He'd been hearing my name lately. The army was about to move out, and the battered 3rd and 4th companies still needed commanders. New recruits had arrived from the rear, but the leadership spots remained unfilled. They'd discussed candidates several times without reaching a decision. There were several qualified people, but only 2 positions. And the real decision-makers, his father Baron Kadochi and his teacher, Battalion Commander Knight, while hadn't spoken yet. I knew I was one of the stronger candidates. 2 company leaders had recommended me, though both were from my own company, Uncle Yashak and Old Carl. To someone like Solon, trained in noble politics, that kind of obvious faction building probably looked crude. Still, my strength, experience, and reputation all met the standard. Reputation matters in a military camp. It helps you hold your position and makes your unit fight harder. As for my age being too young, Solon couldn't really use that argument. He's only 19 himself and already serving as Deputy Cavalry Commander, even though he only joined last year and missed the worst fighting at Felmer Canyon. I'd been through 4 years of combat, big and small. The new recruits respected me more than almost anyone, so my odds were about 50-50. Sir, I'm Rock from the 2nd Company. I came across 2 bottles of good ale recently and wanted to offer them to you, I said, bowing my head respectfully and holding out the bottles. Not bad. Put them over there, he said, pointing to a shelf. I placed them carefully, stealing a quick glance at the treasures on display. I was curious about everything in here. I stepped back to the center of the tent and kept my eyes low. He seemed to appreciate the respect. He asked where I was from. Or mountain town, I told him. He asked my age. 18. That got his attention. He'd heard people say I was too young for a company command, but he hadn't realized I was a year younger than him. Looking at my stubbled jaw and weathered face, he'd assumed I was in my 20s. I heard you fought in the Battle of Gordon Highlands, he said with interest. Yes, sir. That battle was practically the deciding clash between our 2 kingdoms. Solon had heard plenty of veterans brag about it, but he didn't believe their boasting. His teacher, Nightwile, a high-level knight squire, strong enough to command at the brigade level, had told him that even he was badly wounded in that fight. Individual bravery meant nothing when over 100,000 men were killing each other. It didn't matter if you were a high-level knight squire or even a peak-level one. The Baron raising a fighter that strong from a small territory was impressive in itself. Tell me about it. Just your own experience, Solon said eagerly. He invited me to sit on something he called a sofa, captured from a city lord's mansion during the siege of Figure City. Charlo people knew how to live comfortably, he remarked. I sat down stiffly and thought, here's my chance. I'm not a good storyteller. I just described what I saw and lived through, plain and straightforward. No heroics, no drama. But that's exactly what caught Solon's interest. He was tired of exaggerated tales. A common soldier's honest account of a war he had no choice but to fight. That hooked him. I told him the battle happened in late autumn of my 3rd year of service. I was a spearman under Uncle Yashak. I described what I witnessed. massive fireballs sliding across the sky, freezing ice spikes punching through the heaviest armor, a knight in full plate on horseback swinging his sword and unleashing a wave of force that flattened an entire squad of men and horses. Solon leaned in as I talked. He knew a little about the fireballs and ice, supernatural powers he wouldn't have access to until he inherited his title. But the knight-level warriors fascinated him most. He trained in combat energy himself and understood that cutting down a dozen men with one strike required at least a mid-level knight squire's power. He was still only a beginner-level knight squire, despite training since he was 9. Could that kind of warrior just sweep through everything? He asked. I shook my head. I only saw that kind of fighter once. After he cut down that squad, soldiers from all sides swarmed him. There was a burst of blood about 3 feet high, and then nothing. He was gone. Solon couldn't accept that. A mid-level knight squire ranked at least as a battalion commander in either army. A fighter that powerful, killed that simply? Swallowed by ordinary soldiers, dying like anyone else? That's the truth. When over 100,000 people are fighting, even a high-level knight squire can barely keep himself alive. I continued telling Solon my story. Under Uncle Yashak's command, we fought on the left plain of Gordon Highlands. The beautiful yellow grassland turned into a dark red ocean of blood and bodies, and the war kept going. We lost 2 men the first day, more on the third. After just 1 week, Uncle Yashak's squad was down to 4. All the servant soldiers were dead. 1 third-class private was killed, another crippled. We were too deep in the battlefield to carry the wounded man back. After getting his agreement, Uncle Yashak did it himself, gave him a quick death. Neither side was taking prisoners. Everyone knew that. Better to die fast than be tortured. Even with just 4 of us, Yashak and 3 third-class privates, we kept fighting. Fewer people meant better coordination. We didn't lose another man after that. But war is chaos. After a month of non-stop combat, all the formations had scattered. Gordon Highlands was covered with over 100,000 living and dead. One night during my watch, our camp got ambushed. In the confusion, I couldn't find my way back to Uncle Yashak. Years of night marches had given me decent night vision, but that night I wished I didn't have it. Danger everywhere. The attackers were endless. I couldn't see the edge of their forces. I fought and ran and fought. By the next day, I had no idea where I was. Fighting was happening everywhere, so I just joined the nearest group of our side. By evening, the attack was over. The enemy pulled back. Sitting around a campfire with other Foston soldiers, I found out I'd run all the way into the Tiger Legion's combat zone. The group was a mess. Men from the Tiger Legion's 2nd and 3rd Brigades, some from the Supply Brigade, mixed with soldiers from our Eagle Legion and the Wolf Legion. About 200 of us total, led by the only battalion commander around, a Tiger Legion officer named Foss. I drank 2 sips of meat broth and passed out. One advantage of being separated from your own officers. Nobody knew me, so I didn't get put on night watch. But I couldn't go searching for my unit either. Every day there was fighting. So I stayed with this group as Captain Foss led us toward the center of Gordon Highlands, where the Lion Legion was operating. The Lion Legion was Foston's elite, and wherever they were, that's where the decisive battle would happen. We had 2 reasons for going. First, after years of war, everyone left alive had fighting spirit. The cowards were already dead. Second, if you were separated from your unit for more than 20 days, you'd be listed as missing. Missing was only slightly better than deserter. Deserters got their families enslaved and their own heads chopped off at the camp gates. Missing soldiers' families got a tiny pension and nothing else, because command couldn't tell if you'd run, been captured, or died. I'd been a soldier for 2 years by then. I understood the rules. If I was going to die, fine. At least a combat death would give my family enough money to eat for 5 years. Late autumn, year 1345 of the Ormer calendar. On a corner of the central plain of Gordon Highlands, about 3,000 Foston soldiers clashed with about 2,000 Charlot troops. The black banner with a roaring lion marked the Foston side, Lion Legion. The red banner with a howling wolf marked the enemy, the War Wolf Legion, Charlot's best. The battle had been raging for who knows how long. 5,000 men ground down to less than 3,000. No clear lines anymore. Everyone fought whoever was closest, swords, knives, teeth, anything. Every person was drenched in blood, their own or someone else's. That's what we saw when we arrived. Captain Foss activated his combat energy, charged his horse, and led us straight in. Both sides noticed our group. The Charlo fighters were already desperate. Seeing enemy reinforcements, they knew there was no retreat. They were too deep in the melee to pull out. So they fought even harder, with nothing left to lose. The Foston commander on this field was the Lion Legion's 3rd Brigade leader, a high-level knight squire. His brigade had been battling this Charlo force for half a month. He saw our arrival as the final push to wipe them out. Foston had more territory and more people than Charlo. With 2 years of drought, starving civilians had flooded into the army just for food, so manpower wasn't a problem. The kingdom's plan was to simply overwhelm Charlo completely. His own brigade had lost over half its men, but if he destroyed this enemy force and broke their unit designation, he'd earn credit. Our group was a gift. Any smart veteran would have quietly slipped away from a bloodbath this size. But once both sides spotted us, that option vanished. The Charlo troops charged toward us, seeing us as the weaker target. The Foston Brigade commander happily redirected enemies our way to reduce his own losses. And Captain Foss, either a fool or some noble sent to earn medals, charged headlong into the slaughter. We had no choice but to follow. The result was instant and ugly. The Warwolf Legion were battle-hardened elite troops. We were a ragtag group thrown together less than a week ago, strangers who didn't trust each other enough to watch one another's backs. Everyone fought alone. We were fish on a cutting board. Captain Foss was the first to collide with the enemy. His combat energy made him strong, but it also meant he hit harder and bounced back harder. He didn't last long. A head flew 5 meters into the air. I'm pretty sure it was his. With our leader killed, our 200 men were mowed down like wheat. I was in the middle of the formation. I watched Foss's head sail through the air. I watched the men around me fall one after another. I'd been a soldier for 3 years. I'd killed enough men to fill a squad. Before, I was the one doing the killing. Now it was my turn. I'd stopped caring about life and death a long time ago, but facing it for real, I still couldn't stay completely calm. The Warwolf Legion lived up to their name. Even after half a month of brutal fighting, they were still fearsome. The Lion Legion's brigade commander decided the time was right, raised his hand, and charged in with his personal cavalry guard. Our situation was grim. Over 200 of us had been cut down to less than 100. The Charlo commander, also a high-level knight squire, personally led his remaining 300 men to smash through our lines. He was the one who killed Captain Foss with a single stroke. Then the Lion Legion's 700 men surrounded the Charlo force from behind. That's when I understood. The brigade commander had used us as bait. I threw away my spear and fought with my iron sword. Close-quarters combat is no place for a long weapon. I swung wildly, holding nothing back. I knew we were encircled. I couldn't stay in one spot. I retreated while fighting, not knowing where survival lay, only knowing I had to outlast everyone else. Even cornered, our ragtag group showed guts. Over 100 men formed a rough circle and held off the Charlo attacks. I ended up near the outer edge, close to where the Warwolf and Lion Legion forces were clashing. My strength was average at best compared to the others in our thrown-together unit. But I had a working brain. Hiding in the center would only delay death. These Charlo fighters had red eyes and zero concern for their own wounds. Our group couldn't hold them. If I wanted to live, I needed to run toward where our side had more men. Not toward the center of our encirclement, but outward, toward the Lion Legion's lines. Only by breaking through the ring could I find any hope of surviving. I don't know how I survived that final moment. I only found out later, when the memory came back. When the last dozen of us were about to be trampled by a cavalry charge, I grabbed a nearby soldier who'd frozen in terror, held him above me as a shield, and threw myself toward the oncoming horse. He took the impact. I didn't die instantly, but the horse crushed several of my ribs. With the last of my strength, I pulled dead bodies over myself and blacked out. Using a comrade as a human shield is a death sentence if anyone finds out. Execution by slow cutting, your family enslaved for generations. So I buried that secret deep. I've never told a soul. I don't feel guilty about it. In that situation, everyone was going to die. Why shouldn't I trade someone else's death for my survival? When I woke up, I was at the base of a pile of corpses 8 meters high. A scrawny kid with messy yellow hair had found me. His name was Kane, same age as me, enlisted a year later. He'd been ordered to gather friendly dead for burning. I was just another body he was dragging. But I wasn't dead, only unconscious from blood loss. Half a bran cake from Kane brought me back. After that, I took him under my wing, and together we survived the rest of Gordon Highlands. Kane was a beggar from some small town in Tyr province. Joined the army because the drought left him nothing to eat. His unit had been destroyed. Going back would only make him cannon fodder again. So he stuck with me. After the battle, I found Uncle Yashak's squad. Out of 10 men, only 3 remained. Uncle Yashak, Karl, and me. That's when Yashak became company commander, Karl his deputy, and me as second-class private and squad leader. I made Kane my scout. He was thin and quick. Other survivors from broken squads filled our ranks. That's when the 3 of us, me, Hans, and Kane, came together. I finished my story for Solon. I only told him I survived by hiding in a pile of dead bodies. No details about how I got there. That truth dies with me. The tent went quiet for a moment. Then Solon clapped. Impressive, he said. No wonder you've made a name in camp. Real strength, real courage. The complete destruction of the War-Wolf Legion at Gordon Highlands shocked every kingdom in the region. I didn't know a common soldier like you was part of that. I stayed humble. I told him the fighting I saw was just one small piece of a much larger battle, nothing worth praising. I knew how to play this game, show strength and modesty at the same time. Be the kind of subordinate a leader wants. You've done well for your position, he said, then narrowed his eyes. So tell me, what are you really here for? I bowed with my fist against my chest and said in a steady voice, I wish to fight at your side in the battles to come, sir. That was Xiaxi's strategy. Don't ask for a rank. Don't beg for promotion. Just pledge loyalty. If Solon is building his own team with a new company, he'll take care of the rest. Solon seemed pleased. He pointed to a coral-shaped red plant on a shelf to his left. This is called red sea flower. It helps with absorbing combat energy. It's no longer useful to me. Cut a branch and take it with you. Keep it nearby to speed up training, or grind it into juice and drink it, though it doesn't taste great. This should last you 3 days. I looked at the plant. Despite what he said, there were plenty of cut marks on it. He'd clearly been using it regularly. It wasn't truly useless to him. I took only a small finger-length cutting and stepped back respectfully. I accept your ale, he said. I'm going to rest now. I thanked him and left, my heart light. Tonight I'd sleep in camp. I couldn't stay out every night before I had the rank to justify it. I'd told Xiaxi not to wait for me. I'd visit her in a couple of days. Back at camp, squads were drilling everywhere. We'd be moving soon, and every squad leader was pushing his men hard. I made sure to be among the most visible and active. Meanwhile, in the big green tent at the center of camp, the leadership was meeting. Baron Kadochi sat at the head of a long table, a brown-haired man of 40 with a dark mustache, radiating authority. To his left sat Knight, while the massive cavalry commander. To his right, Solon. Then the 6 infantry company commanders, including Uncle Yashak. Behind the Baron stood his old butler, a man in his 50s who'd served the Baron for years. Nobody underestimated him. The Baron spoke first. In 5 days, we attack Franz City. Military command had issued a hard deadline. All units must converge on Intel City within 2 months. So Franz must fall quickly. Baron Kashir's battalion was already coordinated for the joint assault. First Company Commander Mont spoke up, a man who earned his position through brains rather than brawn, the Baron's strategist. He noted that command was getting anxious because the Mighty Wind Legion on the upper route was already approaching Ellis City, while our Eagle Legion hadn't even reached Intel City yet. Nightwell agreed. The rivalry between the 2 legions had been simmering for a long time. Letting the Mighty Wind Legion take the lead was making command nervous. After Felmer Canyon fell months ago, the Charlo Kingdom was exposed. 3 legions were advancing on 3 routes into Charlo's heartland. The Mighty Wind Legion took the upper path, the Lion Legion the center, and our Eagle Legion the lower. Charlo had 3 provinces, and after their regular army was destroyed, there was no serious resistance left. The kingdom's high command decided to push on all 3 fronts at once. I wasn't in the meeting, but I learned what happened from Uncle Yashak afterward. The plan is bigger than just Franz City. The Mighty Wind and Eagle Legions are each targeting one of Charlo's 2 remaining provincial capitals, Ellis City and Intel City. The elite Lion Legion is heading straight for the Charlo capital, Otis City, in the center. Once the two capitals fall, both legions must rush to support the Lion Legion for the final assault on the kingdom itself. Franz City is just a stepping stone. The rest of our regiment's battalions have already cleared the surrounding towns. Regiment Command wants us to push toward Bimmer City as fast as possible. That's Account's territory and the last obstacle before our regiment links up with the rest of the Eagle Legion. First Company Commander Mont questioned why they were rushing when there were still 2 months on the clock. The Baron went quiet, then told them the truth. The homeland can't hold out much longer. The drought ended over a year ago, but the damage is done. Young men are gone. The male-to-female ratio is nearly 1-3. Fields are worked by old people, women, and children. The army's supply chain is breaking down. Population loss, war costs, massive foreign debt. Our kingdom is small, and it can't sustain this kind of war much longer. That shut everyone up. They had to take Franz City fast. Then the meeting turned to the real purpose, choosing 2 new company commanders. They'd argued about this multiple times before with no result. The Baron asked for recommendations. The 3rd Company commander pushed for a guy named Naroma, one of his own squad leaders. His company got wrecked at Felmer Canyon, and he lost his deputy. He wanted someone he knew and could control. The 4th Company's acting commander, their original captain died in battle, recommended Jelson, a 5-year veteran from the 1st Company. He needed an experienced soldier to help manage his company full of green recruits. He wasn't worried about sharing power since his current squad leaders were all brothers who survived alongside him. Others threw out more names: Virginie, Gibb. Uncle Yashak recommended me, calling me steady and driven. The Baron rubbed his forehead and tapped the table. Same old arguments, no agreement. He announced they'd vote. Everyone knew this move. Whenever there was a deadlock, the Baron used a voting system he supposedly learned while studying in the Ormer Empire years ago. The rough soldiers in the room didn't fully grasp its fairness, but they respected the Baron for not just dictating orders like other nobles. It's one reason everyone in that tent trusted him. Nightwall voted first, or rather, he abstained as usual. He always stayed out of these power decisions. While as a noble himself, a hereditary knight created by the Kadochi family. His family has served the Kadochi line for generations, going back to when the Baron's ancestors first settled in Dare province. The Baron's family repaid that loyalty by granting Wall's family hereditary knighthood, no small thing. In Foston, a noble can only create a title 2 ranks below his own, and only one. So a Baron can create 1 knight. A Viscount creates 1 Baron of Honor. A Count creates 1 Baron. A Marquis creates 1 Viscount. The land for these lesser titles comes from the granting nobles' own holdings. There are no dukes in Foston. The kingdom was founded by a duke, and the first king forbade ever creating that rank again, knowing too well how dangerous a duke's power could be. The Weil family earned this trust. Nearly every generation produced a mid-level knight squire, and this generation's Weil had reached high level, a genuinely powerful fighter. After Weil's abstention, Mont voted, then the rest in order. 6 candidates had been nominated, and only 2 would win. The favorites were Naroma and Jelson since they were picked by their own company leaders, and the other voters felt pressure to show respect. But Gibb and I had supporters too. Solon was mostly ignored during the vote. Like his father, he almost never participated in these elections. Uncle Yashak nominated me, so he voted 3rd, right in the middle of the 6 voters. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but Uncle Yashak told me everything afterward, and I pieced together the rest from what others said. The voting went like this. When my name came up, Mont, the 1st Company commander, said I was too young and needed more experience. He voted no, but I noticed later that Solon apparently glanced at him. Mont felt something was off, but brushed it aside. The 1st Company's deputy commander voted yes. He remembered me from after Gordon Highlands, when I stumbled to the camp gates covered in blood with Cain, barely conscious. He was guarding the entrance that day. I'd always been respectful to him after that, greeting him regularly, sending him small gifts from my raids. A couple days ago, I'd given him the ale and a little silver pendant in the Charlot style. Nothing expensive, but it showed I cared. He said I had potential and gave his support. Uncle Yashak and Old Carl both voted for me, as expected. 3 votes. The 4th Company's acting commander voted against me, saying my management skills needed work. 3 votes for, 2 against. It wasn't looking great. Other candidates had 3 votes too, and the favorites, Naroma, and Jelson hadn't even been voted on yet. Then Solon spoke up. I think Rock is more than qualified. His leadership and strength are well above what's needed for a company commander. The tent went silent. Uncle Yashak recovered first and backed him up. Then everyone else started chiming in. Even the ones who'd voted against me suddenly found nice things to say. That's how power works. Once the Baron's son picked a side, nobody wanted to be on the wrong one. Uncle Yashak realized I'd connected with Solon. So did everyone else. The Baron looked at his son with surprise. Solon never participated in these votes. Something had changed. With Solon's support, I had 4 votes, the most of anyone. The remaining rounds went smoothly. Everyone understood. Solon had claimed one of the 2 spots for me, so only one seat was truly up for grabs. Solon stayed quiet for the other candidates, which confirmed what they all suspected. The final tally, me with 4 votes, Jelson with 4 votes. Poor Naroma only got 3. Without Solon's interference, Jelson would have gotten more, and Naroma would have won easily. But nobody argued. The Baron made it official. Then he dropped a second announcement. The 3rd and 4th companies would merge into the new 3rd company. Veterans from every company would be transferred into a rebuilt 4th company. Jelson would command it. I would be his deputy. Then the Baron turned to Solon with a softer tone, the only warmth anyone ever saw from him. He told Solon that the 4th company was his to lead and develop, while keeping his cavalry deputy position too. Don't disappoint me, he said. Yes, father, Solon replied quietly. So Xiaxi was right. The whole thing was about building Solon's team. And I was part of it now. The Baron ordered night while to teach combat energy techniques to the newly promoted commanders. That meant me. The battle plan for Franz City would be discussed at noon the next day. Meeting dismissed. After everyone left, the Baron sat alone with his old butler, Henry. I heard bits about this conversation much later. The Baron asked Henry if he had any regrets serving him all these years. Henry said no. He'd gone from a slave to the Baron's trusted butler. 20 years had passed, and the children had grown up. Then the Baron revealed something surprising. Henry wasn't just a servant. He was a mid-level knight squire, a genuine fighter serving as a butler. The Baron promised he'd always be taken care of. They talked about Henry's 2 sons. George, a cavalry soldier nearing the peak of beginner knight squire level, with potential to reach low level by 30. And Warner, the same Warner who runs the post station where I send my money home. Henry's face only softened when the Baron praised Warner. The Baron noticed and asked why Henry preferred Warner over the more accomplished George. Henry was quiet for a long time. Then he said simply, because he's more devoted to his father. The Baron said nothing. As for the military power behind our battalion, what I learned was eye-opening. Baron Kadochi commands 1 high-level knight squire in Weil, 1 mid-level in Henry, and 3 low-level squires, including himself. That's terrifying strength for a single Baron's territory. By comparison, Baron Kashir, our ally for the Franz City attack, only has 1 mid-level and 2 low-level squires. Weil alone could kill Kashir's entire leadership. A high-level knight squire can defeat 3 mid-levels. Our Baron is far more powerful than he lets on. The whole camp was tense with training. Every squad leader was drilling his men hard, and even the usual troublemakers kept their heads down. Everyone knew this was about their leader's future and their own. All eyes kept drifting toward the big green tent at the center of camp. Finally, the flap opened and the company commanders filed out. They all looked preoccupied, brushing off the soldiers who tried to greet them. Nightwell came out last. He walked up to a group of training soldiers and pointed at 2 of them. Go get Jelson and Rock. Tell them to come to the rear training ground. When the excited messenger reached me, I knew I'd made it. Under the knowing looks of my squad, I headed to the rear training ground alone. That place was legendary among regular soldiers. Only company commander rank and above were allowed there. It was huge too, almost as big as the main training field despite being used by only a dozen people. Jelson was already waiting at the entrance. He's in his 30s, thin build, tall, with a yellowish complexion. A veteran with the same years of service as Uncle Yashak. Good reputation in camp. His promotion didn't surprise me. He greeted me warmly, calling me little brother and praising my name. I called him big brother in return. In the military, rank and strength matter more than age, and we were equals now. We made small talk about which company we'd be assigned to, but neither of us knew yet. Inside the training ground, there were tents and watchtowers along the sides, with a wide open space in the center divided into sections by fences. Weapons lined the edges, spears, swords, even sets of armor. Knight, while was waiting in the largest section. We greeted him respectfully. He responded with a flat, I could feel a faint contempt. He's a noble, and we're commoners who just got promoted. Jelson sensed it too. We both kept our posture humble. We needed what he had to teach us. What I'm teaching you today is Eagle Combat Energy, he said. It's the standard technique of the Eagle Legion. Everyone from the Legion commander down to a regular first-class private trains in this method. It can be cultivated all the way to the Knight level. You must never share it with anyone. Yes, sir, we both answered. He got straight to it, breathing techniques and how to condense a combat energy seed. The whole afternoon was spent under his instruction. By evening, the sunset broke through the clouds as Jelson and I stood in horse stance, shirts off, faces red, straining with everything we had. This is the first step, forming the combat energy seed. The best age to start training is 12 to 14. We'd both missed that window, but we had strong wills and iron control over our bodies, forged through years of survival. Normally, this step takes 1 to 3 days, and it depends more on willpower than natural talent. Neither of us wanted to be second. As the last light of sunset disappeared, I roared, "Condense!" A tiny white speck, the size of a grain of rice, formed below my navel. I'd done it. Jelson, pushed by my success, broke through moments later with his own shout. His seed appeared too. Knight walked over. Impressive. Forming the seed on the first day, that's the toughness of battlefield soldiers. Rest well tonight. From now on, follow the circulation path I taught you and train on your own. Come find me here if you have questions. He turned and left. Jelson and I stared at each other, gasping for air, and burst out laughing. We both knew what this meant. We'd stepped into the circle of the strong. We had a sliver of control over our own fate now. 2 guards came and helped us back to camp. Knight while's doing. We'd missed dinner with the Baron, and our official assignments hadn't been announced yet, so we went to the camp kitchen. The cook, Corey, had been tipped off and prepared a feast for us. A feast, meaning white bread and meat stew. But it was my first time eating white bread in my life. Long, pale, soft. One bite, and it was flaky and sweet. Compared to the black bread that's hard enough to use as a weapon, this was heavenly. I grabbed one in each hand and devoured them. Jelson ate just as messily. Corey had made 6 loaves and a huge pot of stew. A whole day's exhaustion melted away with that meal. After dinner, we parted ways. I walked slowly back to my tent. Honestly, I was stuffed. I'd eaten meat before, but never anything this good. Thankfully, all that food didn't disturb my newly formed combat energy seed. Before I even reached the tent, sharp-eyed Peter spotted me and yelled inside, "Big Brother Rock is back." A mob of my guys came pouring out. A few minutes later, I stood there with a dark expression while my squad celebrated by tossing me into the air repeatedly. Picture a man who just ate until he could burst, being launched skyward by a group of excited brutes. It was miserable. The darkness hid my face, so they didn't notice my suffering. They bombarded me with questions. I gave in and told them about my afternoon, the training, the combat energy seed. Hans asked, "So now that you have combat energy, are you stronger than before?" I thought about it and gave the only honest answer I could. Probably. That night, after answering endless strange questions from my squad, I lay in bed thinking. The official assignment hadn't come yet. Probably tomorrow. I touched the spot below my navel where the combat energy seed sat. Nothing visible on the outside, but I could feel it. A tiny white speck the size of a grain of rice. Nightwall called it a combat energy vortex, though it didn't look like any vortex to me. I thought about Xiaxi. I hadn't visited her in a couple days. I'd go tomorrow and bring something. I wondered about home. My parents' last message said everything was fine and to stay safe. Knowing them, they'd probably saved most of the money I sent for my future wedding. Marriage, the thought made me grin like an idiot. In our world, finding a good wife is the dream of every common man. Xiaxi would be great, pretty, can brew ale, knows how to read and do numbers. But she's been married before. My parents probably wouldn't approve. Then I thought about my sister. In my eyes, she's the most beautiful woman there is. And she's been running the household alone since I left. If I could marry someone like her. My mind wandered into strange territory again before I drifted off to sleep. Early the next morning, I went to the rear training ground before anyone else. I wanted to test what combat energy actually did for me. According to Nightwile, I'm at the entry-level Night Squire stage. My combat energy is still just a seed. At this level, it can only heal injuries and boost strength. When the seed grows to the size of a pigeon egg, I'll hit the peak of entry level and can advance to low-level Night Squire. He only taught me the entry-level method. The next stage comes when I'm ready. I walked up to a boulder about the size of a grown man. Before, I could lift it halfway to my knees and hold it for a few seconds. Without using combat energy, I tried again. Same result. Knees, barely, 10 seconds, then it crashed down. After resting, I tried with combat energy. I drew a thread of it from my belly into my arms and core. I grabbed the boulder and heaved. This time it came up to my chest. I felt a cool sensation below my navel. The seed was shrinking fast, from a large rice grain to nearly a small one. I used the last of my strength and threw the boulder. It flew 5 meters. I stared at my hands. Combat energy had doubled or maybe tripled my strength. The duration was short, but that's because I'd only trained for 1 day and had almost no reserves. I also noticed it didn't actually make my muscles stronger. It was more like a boost layered on top. My arms were screaming in pain from lifting weight my body couldn't naturally handle. Then a cool stream flowed from the seed up to my arms on its own, soothing the soreness. Nightwile had mentioned this. Combat energy automatically protects its user when injured. I could direct it for faster healing, but my seed had already shrunk again, so I decided not to waste any more. I sat cross-legged and practiced the breathing exercises. 3 hours passed without me noticing. When I opened my eyes, it was 10 in the morning. My seed had grown back to its original size, but no bigger. 4 other company commanders had arrived to train, including Uncle Yashak and Nightwile, each in their own section. You can't disturb someone during combat energy meditation. It slows their absorption and makes them irritable. So I practiced swordsmanship with a training sword while I waited. An hour later, they all finished. Uncle Yashak spotted me and called out with a laugh, saying I was good material for coming here so early. He invited me to breakfast. On the way, I learned the assignments. Jelson and I were both going to the 4th company. He as commander, me as deputy. Fair enough. He has more experience and ability than me. I had nothing to complain about. I pressed Uncle Yashak for training advice. Nightwile had only given us the basics yesterday, no tricks or details. He clearly held back because we're outsiders. Uncle Yashak was the only person who'd share real knowledge with me. The other commanders tactfully left us alone, knowing we needed to talk privately. When I complained that my seed hadn't grown after a whole morning of practice, Uncle Yashak smacked my head. I've been training for over a year, and mine is only the size of a bean. You've trained 1 day, and you want to fly? He told me combat energy is a slow grind. The harder you work, the stronger you get. No shortcuts. I asked if there was any way to speed things up. He said rare natural treasures can accelerate training. Some precious ones can even boost you a whole level. But he doubted I'd ever be lucky enough to find one. I made a disappointed face, but inside I was thinking about the Red Sea flower cutting Solon gave me. I'd given it to Xiaoshi to plant in a pot. I hoped it was growing. If it couldn't be planted, I'd just have to eat it like Solon suggested. Uncle Yashak tried to comfort me. Being common-born and having combat energy at all is a blessing. While says people who train in combat energy live 20 or 30 years longer than normal. That alone is worth it. I mumbled, oh, still thinking about my flower. I'm young. Living longer doesn't mean much to me yet. Then he mentioned another option, training potions. You can exchange military merit for them, but only first-class privates and above qualify. Our battalion only stocks basic healing potions. For training potions, you'd have to go to Legion headquarters or military command, and the prices are insane. The lines are long, and outsiders from smaller units can barely get any even with enough merit points. Guess I just have to train hard every day, I said. Obviously. Even Nightwile at his level still trains daily, Uncle Yashak replied. I asked what level Nightwile had reached. Uncle Yashak's expression turned serious. High-level Night Squire, he said quietly. That was a realm far beyond anything either of us could touch. The path of combat energy is steep. Each level is a massive leap. Nightwile is 3 full levels above me. No wonder he looks down on us. A high-level Night Squire can probably hold off half a cavalry company alone. The thought made me shiver. Then Uncle Yashak glanced around carefully and lowered his voice. He told me there's another way to speed up training magical creatures. In larger forests, some animals develop crude magical abilities. Since Eagle Combat Energy is Wind-type, finding a Wind-type magical creature would be a real prize. Their blood and meat can boost your training. He said the company commanders once found a magical rabbit in a valley, Wind-type, the size of a hyena, could even shoot wind blades. After they killed and split it, his combat energy seed grew noticeably. But he warned me not to think it was easy. He explained the rankings. Magical creatures are roughly equal to entry-level Night Squires. Once they evolve into magical beasts, the low-level tier, they gain real intelligence and become far more dangerous. Mid-level beasts match mid-level squires, and high-level beasts match high-level squires. He told me our battalion once encountered a mid-level Earth-type bear beast. Nightwall drove it off, but couldn't kill it. Its hide was too thick for our Wind-type energy to penetrate. So don't rush at every magical creature you see, he said. Good advice. I filed it away and started thinking about which forests nearby might be worth exploring, with Uncle Yashak and the others, of course. We arrived at the green tent at Camp Center. This was where the Baron and all company commanders ate. I'd dreamed about this place for years. Now I actually belonged here. It hit me hard for a moment. Uncle Yashak slapped my back. Stop staring. Go in. Inside. All the company commanders greeted me warmly since it was my first time. Jelson had arrived before me and got his share of flattery too, though I noticed people seemed more interested in talking to me, probably because of my connection to Solon. When Baron Kadochi arrived with Solon and the old butler, lunch officially started. Maids poured a cup of wine for each of us. Grape wine from the occupied Petersfield territory, low in alcohol and smooth. Servants brought out dish after dish of fine food. Enjoy it, Uncle Yashak murmured beside me. Once we march, meals like this are over. I kept my composure through the whole meal. No gawking, no nervousness. The Baron asked me a few questions about my life and family. I expressed my loyalty and gratitude. I hear your parents are alive and you have a sister, the Baron asked. He already had my background on file. A company commander oversees 100 men, so I was now part of his leadership. Yes, sir. I'll have my territory look after your family. Work hard, young man. You've got time on your side. It was a brief exchange, but it was my first real conversation with the Baron. My heart was pounding. At the end of lunch, the Baron formally announced the appointments of Jelson and me. Everyone already knew, but hearing it from his mouth made it official. The election was over, and the attack on France City would be my first mission as a company commander. 2 days later, our new 4th Company held its first meeting. Jelson and I sat with our 10 squad leaders in the tent at the northwest corner of camp. Jelson ran the meeting. We'd agreed on that beforehand. He has a natural balance between authority and approachability. Each squad leader introduced himself. Gulas, a big bearded man leading the first squad. Lefferst, a dark-faced young man with a hooked nose, leading the second. Bend, Morit, and the rest followed. The old 3rd and 4th companies had been merged. The former 4th Company commander predictably took his best men with him before leaving. The Baron expected this and ordered every company to send experienced soldiers to fill our ranks. Jelson and I both understood our position. We were outsiders dropped into this company. We didn't want the old guard. Fresh blood was better, easier to shape and control. Over the past 2 days, we'd handpicked our squad leaders. Some were transferred from other companies, some were promoted on merit, and a couple got their spots through connections. I'd received 20 silver d'Urliers in gifts from people seeking favor, more money than I'd ever held at once. We each allowed 1 squad leader spot for someone with backing. The one I approved came from a powerful merchant family back in the Baron's territory, a family with influence even in the Baron's own trade caravan. These people may have gotten in through the back door, but having those connections is a kind of strength too. My original squad came with me. Of my guys, Hans and Kane were the only ones qualified for squad leader. Since Kane is a scout and weaker in direct combat than Hans the shield fighter, I appointed Hans as 7th squad leader. Jelson learned quickly about my relationship with Solon. He didn't let his position as commander go to his head. Instead, he shared power with me equally and consulted me on everything. At the meeting, Jelson briefed everyone. Our company would be in the third wave of the assault on France City. In a siege, the first wave takes the heaviest casualties, with losses decreasing in each subsequent wave. The fourth wave is the final push. By then the gates are breached and cavalry charges through to seize the city Lord's Manor. Third wave sounds easier, but our job was critical. Hold the gates open. If we fail, the cavalry can't enter, the forces inside and outside can't link up, and the whole siege either costs far too many lives or fails entirely. This would be our company's first battle together. Jelson and I were both determined to make it count. Our meeting ran until nighttime. Jelson handled the details while I filled in gaps. After it ended, I said goodbye to Jelson and walked through camp, mentally reviewing the battle plans. Before I knew it, I was at the camp gate. Tonight, I was going to Xiaxi's. Sir, the gate guard saluted me. At my rank now, spending nights outside camp was allowed. The tavern was already closed when I got there. I banged on the door. Xiaxi opened up and poked my chest with her finger, scolding me for being so loud. I told her not to worry. Since my promotion, nearly 10 soldiers were guarding the tavern daily. The whole town knew the Green Palm was under a Foston Company commander's protection now. She rolled her eyes. I looked at her and couldn't help myself. I scooped her up and carried her to the bedroom despite her protests. Afterward, she fell into a deep sleep. I was wide awake. Combat energy strengthens not just the body but the mind. A few hours of that was nothing to me now. Lying there, I thought about the Red Sea flower. It couldn't be planted, as I'd half expected. Keeping it nearby during training had sped up my energy flow, but after 3 days the cutting started drying out. I didn't want to risk it losing its power, so I ground it into juice and drank it, just as Solon had said. 3 days worth, exactly as promised. But in those 3 days, my combat energy seed nearly doubled, from rice grain size to mung bean size. Incredible stuff. Without the flower, at my normal training pace, it would take a year just to reach Uncle Yashak's current level, and over a decade to hit the pigeon egg size needed for low-level Knight Squire. I'm only 18, but I don't want to waste my life crawling along. Knight, while reached high level in his 30s. I refuse to believe I'm worse than anyone. I need to find other ways, military potions, magical creature blood, whatever it takes. I looked at Xia, she sleeping peacefully. Her husband, I'd met him a couple days ago. A sleazy middle-aged man with a thin mustache. The moment he learned my rank, he swore he'd leave Xiaxi alone and even paid me money as compensation. We're about to march, and I need stability in the rear. He's the local power here, so I couldn't do anything too extreme. But I took 70% of his shady businesses. His payments come in Charlo silver coins, which have crashed in value. The Baron's caravan exchanges them at 3 to 1, so his weekly 10 Charlo coins work out to about 3 silver d'Urliers. Not bad for doing nothing. I'm not done with him, though. The fact that he's technically still Xiaxi's husband bothers me. When the time is right, I'll deal with him permanently. For now, he can keep being useful. Other company commanders look down on the defeated Charlo people, but I don't. Anyone who thrives after losing a war is someone worth paying attention to. I might be the first company commander in our battalion to accept tribute from Charlo locals. The next morning, I headed to the supply camp's caravan area. We march tomorrow, and I had things to arrange. Before I could even announce myself, a pudgy caravan manager rushed out to greet me. He was from the same merchant family as one of the squad leaders in my company, the one who got his position through connections. Half of my 20 silver d'Urliers had come from this man. I told him I needed Xiaxi placed with the caravan during the march. He agreed instantly. I wasn't the first commander to make this kind of request. Other officers had picked up women during the campaign too, and they all stashed them with the supply train when it's time to fight. I also promised him that future loot from my company would go through him first. The Baron's rule is that each company handles its own spoils from raids and sieges. It keeps soldiers motivated. As a company commander, I decide who processes our captures. The fat manager was thrilled. He'd been competing with the Baron's own caravan and the other big merchant families for scraps. Having a company commander funnel goods his way was a real win. Something clicked in my mind. The Baron's caravan isn't the only operation. Big merchant families from Kadochi territory control most of the supply train. There are 8 managers total, and 5 belong to these private merchants. I wondered if the extra 2 silver d'Urliers per month that every soldier receives, supposedly the Baron's personal gift, actually comes from these merchants. After that, I went to see Solon. I could have asked the Baron's caravan to look after Xiaxi, but that would mean asking for favors and possibly leaving a bad impression. Uncle Yashak told me most commanders use the private merchant caravans instead. At Solin's tent, the same two guards stood watch. Now that I had combat energy, I could sense theirs. They'd both trained, but neither was as strong as me, even without my energy boost. They felt the pressure I gave off and announced me immediately. "Come in," Solon called lazily from inside. I entered and waited while he emerged from behind his screen, clothes half open. He'd clearly just woken up. With my peripheral vision, I caught a flash of pale skin behind the screen. On the eve of battle, only Solon and the Baron had the privilege of keeping a woman in their tent. Power really is a wonderful thing, I thought. I went to see Solon that morning. He told me not to bother reporting the squad leader list. Jelson and I could handle that ourselves. Tomorrow's march wouldn't reach Franz City until the afternoon, so no fighting expected on the road. He'd stay with the cavalry and leave the infantry to us. Then I worked up the courage to mention the Red Sea flower. He saw right through me. He explained that the flower only works for entry-level knight squires. It speeds up energy circulation and boosts reserves when eaten raw, but becomes useless once you reach peak entry level. It's still a valuable treasure, and he wasn't going to just hand it over. But then he added something that made my heart race. If I distinguish myself in battle and make him proud, he might reward me with more. The flower is rare but not impossible to buy, so giving it to me wouldn't be out of the question with the right motivation. "I won't disappoint you, sir," I said, meaning every word. This was my path to getting stronger. At the training ground that morning, I practiced as usual. I'd gotten to know the other regulars over the past few days. Karain, the 1st Company Deputy, Uncle Yashak, Dar, the 3rd Company Deputy, and Jelson. Mont and Knight, while showed up occasionally. Old Carl never came, saying he'd rather save his energy for killing enemies. Since my promotion, I'd been issued a half-body suit of armor and a sword. The armor was the real prize, forged from Blackstone and Crown ore, strong yet lighter than standard issue. It's a restricted military item worth at least 80 silver durliers on the black market. My old sword went to Hans. My monthly income had changed dramatically. 10 silver durliers from military command, 10 from the Baron's personal fund, plus gray income from various sources, roughly 40 silver durliers a month. That used to be my entire yearly wage. Uncle Yashak had been coaching me on politics too. He pointed out that the other commanders all had hidden advantages. Karain has a distant noble relative. Dar's family are major merchants in the Baron's territory, which is why his combat energy is more advanced despite being younger. Another commander is supposedly marrying into the Baron's family. None of them are simple. But don't sell yourself short, Uncle Yashak told me. When we go home, company commanders become at least town-level leaders. They'll need you as much as you need them. Build good relationships now. At lunch, the Baron discussed tomorrow's departure over the meal. I noticed something about our battalion. Almost every meeting happens at the dinner table. It builds unity without anyone realizing it. The Baron is brilliant at this. That evening, I went to Xiaxi. I told her everything was arranged. Someone would come for her tomorrow, and she'd travel with the supply caravan. I'd visit when I could. She looked up at me with soft eyes and nodded quietly. The tavern's ale was long gone, so there was no reason for her to stay. I told her to bring her brother too, an honest, weathered man in his 20s. I'd find him work after the battle. After a little time together, I left early. The Baron might inspect the camp tonight for a morale check, and I needed to be present. The next morning, the camp woke like a giant beast stirring to life. Every soldier ate a quick breakfast, fell in with his squad, and squads formed into companies. For infantry companies, over 400 men assembled into a 5-column formation and marched out beneath the Foston Kingdom's thorn-crowned banner. Then the cavalry charged out, the Baron's prized unit. Warhorses fitted with spiked shoes and draped in light chain mail stained faintly red. The riders wore battle-scarred armor and carried tall lances that gleamed with a cold blue edge. Everything about them screamed power and bloodlust. The entire column took a full quarter-hour to clear the gates. Behind us, only a skeleton garrison and the supply train remained. The Charlot civilians watching from the roadside shrank back in fear, breathing easier only after we'd passed. Xiaxi was among the watchers. She wasn't afraid, she was worried. She spotted me on horseback in my armor. The helmet hid my face, but she recognized my eyes. She closed her own and prayed quietly for my safety. The fat caravan manager, Henry, came to collect her personally. He was eager to prove himself. His merchant family held a middling share of the battalion's supply operation, and securing my patronage was a real opportunity. He'd actually spent money trying to back Naroma for the promotion. When I won instead, he pivoted without hesitation. Whoever sits in the chair, he'll serve. The Charlotte townspeople scattered when Henry's bodyguards appeared in Foston clothing. They assumed she must be someone important if these soldiers were treating her so respectfully. I have a brother who needs to come too, she said quietly. Henry hadn't been told about that, but he didn't blink. A brother? No problem. Where is he? Bring him along. And with that, she left Giza town behind and followed the army toward whatever came next. I rode at the head of my company, adjusting my mindset. This is war. People die. I've seen fighters stronger than me get killed by weaker opponents because they lost focus. I never want to be that person. So before every battle, I prepare myself mentally. My warhorse was assigned to me after my promotion. Uncle Yashak helped me pick a chestnut red one. Warhorses are worth more than human lives. One horse could trade for a full suit of armor worth 80 silver coins, and even then you might not find a seller. Dead soldiers' armor can be reused. Dead horses can't be replaced. That's why only company commanders and above get their own mount. I rode through my company's formation so my soldiers could see me. It matters before a fight. They need to know their commander is right there with them. Gulas, the big bearded squad leader from 1st Company, asked when we'd reach France City. I told him by evening at this pace. He looked disappointed that we wouldn't fight today. I could tell this guy lives for battle. What I didn't say out loud was that we needed to link up with Baron Kashir's forces first. Attacking a baron's fortified city with just our battalion would cost too many lives. Around 2 in the afternoon, we stopped in a forest by the road. The infantry sat in circles by squad while cavalry scouts rode back and forth. The baron and the commanders sat on a huge, freshly cut tree stump, discussing plans. He was getting impatient. Baron Kashir was late. A scout finally rode up and reported Kashir's troops would arrive in half an hour. The baron waved him away. Everyone was irritated. Some grumbled openly. The baron looked calm, but those who knew him could tell he was furious. When Kashir's army finally arrived, we were ready. At the command, every squad snapped into formation. Companies linked together, and within minutes our 400-man column stood in perfect order. Our cavalry thundered forward in a show of force. Baron Kashir rode up, grinning, apologizing about refugees blocking his road. His smile said he wasn't sorry at all. Baron Kadochi matched his tone perfectly, all warmth and no anger. Kashir complimented our troops, especially eyeing our cavalry. He only had about a dozen horsemen himself, all bodyguards. Kashir brought around 600 infantry, more than us, but the quality gap was obvious. Some of his soldiers couldn't even hold a spear correctly. Others looked like they'd been pulled straight from the fields, dark-skinned and hunched. Compared to our disciplined ranks, they looked like amateurs. The two barons chatted casually, in no hurry. Noble pleasantries, gossip about court ladies, boasting about loot. I shook my head. My company was positioned at the rear of our formation, connecting with Kashir's troops. I recognized some faces among his soldiers, squad leaders I'd fought alongside before. They spotted my new armor and horse, and envy was written all over their faces. I nodded to each of them. These are common men like me who clawed their way up to squad leader. Every one of them has skills. I believe in having as many friends as possible. By evening, the sun dropped below the horizon and darkness settled over France City. It was a small city, but you could tell from the dense streets and tightly packed buildings that it had once been prosperous. Not anymore. Yellow leaves piled unswept along the roads. Refugees sat everywhere. Shops were shuttered, and the ones that were open had been broken into. Splintered doors told the story of the chaos. Hard to believe this was a thriving place just a year ago. Somewhere inside those darkening streets, 2 figures in black cloaks moved quickly through a deep alley. The one in front carried a bulge under her cloak, a child. An old man's voice urged from behind, "My lady, it's getting dark. We must hurry." The woman walked faster. Under her hood was a pale face framed by golden hair, a sign of noble birth. She looked exhausted. In her arms, a girl of about 11 or 12 clung to her neck without making a sound. The child wore fine but thin clothing, her bare arms pale and fragile. Despite clearly being unwell, she stayed silent, holding tight. They reached a wooden door deep in the alley. The old man knocked. A servant girl of 17 or 18 peeked through a crack, recognized them, and opened the door quickly. They slipped inside, and the door shut behind them. The alley fell dark and silent again. We reached Franz City by evening and set up the siege. The plan was the same as always: surround 3 gates, leave 1 open. Baron Kadochi's forces took the west gate, Baron Kashir's took 2 gates, and the north gate was left as an escape route. But escape is generous. Night Weil and the cavalry were waiting there, ready to catch any rich merchants or nobles trying to flee. Those are the real prizes. The 2 barons sat by a campfire roasting a wild chicken one of Kashir's guards had caught, chatting like old friends while nearly 1,000 soldiers wrapped 2 rings around the city. Everyone got orders to eat and rest. Tonight we surround, but don't attack. The point is to crush their will to resist. Besides, we'd marched all day and needed recovery. The assault begins at dawn. My company was positioned at the west gate. The 3rd company would probe the defenses first. Then the 1st and 2nd companies would hit hard. That's usually where the battle is decided. These small cities typically fall the same way every time. My 4th company goes in 3rd wave to clean up and hold the gate for the cavalry. Our mission looked relatively light compared to the others. I felt relieved. After 4 years of war, I still have a healthy fear of death. Less danger means less loot, but I'll take that trade. Being alive is what matters. Inside the city, I didn't know it yet, but there was a story unfolding that would matter to me later. A woman named Grace was hiding in a small courtyard deep in the city. She was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of Marquis Philip, one of the 3 great marquises who each governed a province of the Charlotte Kingdom. One of those 3, Marquis Clark, had already died fighting at Gordon Highlands. The other 2, including her father, were now defending the last major cities to protect the Charlotte capital. A month ago, her father had summoned her. The kingdom was dying, he told her. The royal family was watching all noble families to prevent anyone from fleeing. No men of the house would be allowed to leave. Only she and her niece, Christine, her older brother's 11-year-old daughter, were permitted to go. He ordered her to take the girl to her younger half-brother Willis, who governed Franz City. From there, she was to borrow soldiers, cross the Morphe Forest, and reach the Calamon Kingdom on the other side. The Marquis had estates there. They could live safely. She arrived with 12 guards and Christine. But Willis, her father's son by a servant woman, always resentful of the family that overlooked him, had no warmth for them. He seized her guards for his city defense, stuck her in a tiny courtyard, and ignored her. He wanted the forest crossing map and the deeds to the Calamon estates. He planned to take everything and abandon them. Grace understood his game. She was known as a sharp socialite in the capital. But Willis couldn't openly harm her. Too many soldiers in the city recognized the Marquis's daughter. So he starved her out slowly instead. By the time our army appeared, Grace hadn't eaten in a day. She'd only managed to sneak 2 pastries during a visit to Willis's manor at noon. Their food money was gone. She'd pawned her earrings and bracelet, but grain prices had skyrocketed. A blue sapphire necklace was her last possession. Christine was sick with fever, pale and thin, too weak to complain, but too sweet to stop offering her aunt sips of the plain noodle soup that was their last food. When the noise erupted outside, screaming, panic, the chaos of a city being surrounded, Grace's old butler burst in with the news. Foston troops were encircling the city. They had to run. Now, before the ring closed completely, Grace grabbed the half-asleep Christine and with her butler and maid, joined the stream of wealthy residents fleeing north. Both servants had combat energy training. If they could reach the Morphe Forest, maybe they had a chance. I knew nothing of these people that night. I was checking my equipment, eating my rations, and going over the plan in my head. Tomorrow at dawn, we attack. Solon surprised us by showing up at our company's position for the battle. Made sense. Our company was built for him, and our task was the lightest. He came prepared, a fine McKelly chainmail suit, a 2-handed greatsword, and 2 bodyguards whose combined strength could probably beat me. Jelson and I understood. Keeping Solon safe was our real job. Then word came down that changed everything. We had to take the city gate by evening. The Baron wanted Franz City in one day. That meant a meat grinder. All companies rotating in, throwing bodies at the wall until something breaks. One gate falls, the rest follow. We only had ladders. Kashir's men had 2 catapults, which was our main siege firepower. A messenger arrived. Prepare for combat in 1 hour. The soldiers got restless. Jelson and I calmed them down with the Baron's orders. I told Jelson I'd lead our company in first, and he should stay back to protect Solon. He looked like he wanted to argue, but just nodded. The 3rd company went in to probe the defenses. Over 100 men, and they couldn't even reach the gate. They got pushed back with casualties. My stomach dropped. This wasn't going to be easy. Something was wrong. A small city like this, with maybe 1,000 residents and no regular army, should have at most 4 companies of defenders, including conscripted civilians. But this single gate had roughly 2 companies worth of troops, and they were pouring down fire oil, rocks, and arrows like they had unlimited supplies. Jelson noticed it too. I told him the extra numbers were probably refugees pressed into service. No real threat. The problem was the sheer volume of projectiles. The 3rd company's commander, nearly as strong as Uncle Yashak, had personally hacked through 2 falling oil barrels and almost reached the wall before a storm of arrows forced him back. Chris, another commander in full plate armor, came back looking like a porcupine. His armor and combat energy kept the arrows from piercing flesh, but it was still terrifying. Then the 1st and 2nd companies charged together. This was our battalion's main strength. Mont led the way with a huge black shield, combat energy glowing blue-green across his body. As a low-level knight squire, he could channel energy through his entire body for short bursts of enhanced defense. He carved a path forward, sheltering soldiers behind his shield. The defenders spotted him and rolled out a siege crossbow, a massive weapon designed specifically to kill fighters like him. Several ordinary men can operate one to take down anyone below mid-level knight squire. With arrows and oil already limiting his movement, the crossbow became a real threat. Mont had to start dodging, losing his steady advance. But he was experienced enough to evade a stationary weapon while still pushing forward. Eventually, Mont and several squads reached the base of the wall. The other commanders brought their groups up different routes. The battle escalated into a full clash, defenders raining everything they had, our catapults hammering the wall top. Now it was a war of endurance. Whoever broke first would lose. The other gates were heating up too. Kashir's forces were sloppier but had the numbers, swarming forward in dark masses that would shake anyone's nerves. I didn't know it at the time, but inside the city, something ugly was happening. Grace, Marquis Philip's daughter, had tried to flee with her niece Christine when our siege began, but she didn't make it. Her half-brother Willis, the city lord, had her captured and dragged to his manor. He wanted the map to cross the Morphe Forest and the deeds to the family's estates in the Calamon Kingdom. Grace refused. Willis had already taken Christine somewhere and was using the sick little girl as leverage. Grace screamed at him, calling him an animal. She grabbed his collar before soldiers pulled her back. Willis calmly straightened his clothes and told her she'd never see Christine again unless she handed over the map. "She's your own niece," Grace cried. That broke something in Willis. He grabbed Grace's arms and shook her violently, ranting about how their father and the family had never treated him as one of their own. While other noble children enjoyed the capital, he'd been dumped in this remote city. His mother, a servant who bore him, he'd never even met. He accused the family's other women of murdering her. Grace wept because she knew the truth. Her aunts had conspired to kill Willis's mother while their father was away on duty. They couldn't tolerate a servant being treated as an equal. When Marquis Philip returned, all he could do was send the young Willis far away to protect him from further harm. But from the madness in Willis's eyes, Grace could see that none of that mattered now. Reason was gone. He wanted what he wanted, and he'd burn everything else down to get it. Inside the city, Grace gave Willis what he wanted. She opened her blue sapphire necklace. It was hollow, hiding a tiny scroll with a map of the Morphe Forest and a black ring that served as proof of ownership for the family's estates in the Calamon Kingdom. Willis took both and released her. Christine and the maid Rafi came running from the next room. Willis rode off with his 50 most loyal horsemen, planning to break through the weakest part of our siege. He knew the city couldn't hold 300 real soldiers and a bunch of conscripted refugees against over 1,000 of us. He'd spread his defenders across all 4 gates to create the illusion of a strong defense while he escaped. Grace called after him, asking where her old butler was. He resisted too much. I killed him, Willis said without looking back. Grace collapsed. Without the butler, a low-level night squire, her chances of crossing the Morphe forest were almost zero. The maid's combat energy was far weaker. Grace decided to disguise herself as a common Charlo civilian, return to the small courtyard, and wait. She still had hidden assets elsewhere in the kingdom. Maybe someday she could recover them and live as a wealthy commoner, if not a noble. But she'd never experienced war. She had no real idea what was coming. Outside the walls, I grabbed a shield from somewhere and charged forward through the rain of arrows. The order had come. All companies in. Take the gate today. Mon had secured a foothold at the base of the wall. His combat energy was nearly drained from blocking countless rocks and arrows single-handedly. He'd done most of the work getting us this far. 3 ladders were set up. When I arrived, he told me Uncle Yashak and Karain had already climbed up. My heart dropped. I shouted for Gulas, Hans, and Kane to follow me. I grabbed a ladder, clenched my sword between my teeth, and started climbing. Uncle Yashak had looked after me like a father. I wasn't going to sit at the bottom while he fought up there. My half-armor's helmet deflected arrows at close range. I dodged falling rocks. But the men below me weren't so lucky. One hit from an arrow or fire oil meant falling off the wall. Not that high, but enough to kill or cripple. Boulders swept away whole groups at once. Only squad leaders and the strongest third-class privates could keep climbing behind me. This is why servant soldiers and third-class privates always take the heaviest losses. I didn't look back. The thuds of bodies hitting the ground and the screams told me enough. As a squad leader, I only had to worry about 10 men. Now I commanded 100. I didn't want to end up a commander with no one to command. I channeled a quarter of my combat energy into my right foot and kicked off the ladder. I launched into the air, shocking the enemy, shocking my soldiers, and shocking myself. It burned through energy fast, but combined with the ladder and the wall, I scrambled sideways and made it over the top. Uncle Yashak's group fighting nearby helped clear space for me. The situation on the wall was bad. 3 of our company commanders, including Uncle Yashak, were pinned in a tiny area, maybe 20 square meters wide. Dead bodies covered the ground, ours and theirs. I spotted 2 enemy fighters with combat energy, each surrounded by soldiers, pressing our commanders back. But our ladders were holding, and our men kept climbing up. As long as we held those ladders, the wall would eventually fall. The Charlo defenders knew it too. They couldn't believe we had 4 combat energy users on their wall already. Where were their reinforcements? On the other side of the city, Kashir's attack on his 2 gates was less intense. He was getting anxious. Unlike our Baron, he couldn't send low-level knight squires to charge the walls. His strongest fighter was a single low-level squire bodyguard, and he wasn't about to risk that man. But the agreement was clear. Whoever breaks through first gets first pick of the spoils and a bigger share. This was a Marquis' Sun city. The loot would be enormous. He couldn't afford to let our Baron win. Master Jackson, Kashir called quietly. A black-robed old man appeared from the shadows. We must break through this gate first. I'm counting on you, Kashir said. Moments later, every person on the battlefield heard a massive explosion. Those with sharp eyes could see 3 fireballs hovering above one of Kashir's gates. I heard it from the wall. Magic, I whispered. The battlefield's ultimate weapon, mysterious, devastating power. Outside the walls, Baron Kadochi watched the 3 fireballs hovering over Kashir's gate. A spellcaster, he muttered coldly. Solon saw them too and ordered our company forward. Jelson tried to protest about Solon's safety, but got silenced with a glare. Poor Jelson. He was probably thinking he'd make me babysit next time while he charged the walls. Inside the city, Willis heard the explosion and knew it was magic. He gathered his 50 elite riders and their wagons loaded with wealth, then broke through the lightly defended North Gate. But waiting on the other side was our cavalry. Willis had secretly trained his combat energy to low-level Knight Squire, but the armored rider at the front of our cavalry radiated pressure far beyond his own. Willis's personal bodyguard, also a skilled fighter, took one look and told his lord to just run. That was Nightwild's gate. The city fell around noon. Both our gate and Kashir's broke at almost the same time. With enemies pouring in from 2 sides, The remaining Charlo soldiers retreated to the city lord's manor, realized their lord had abandoned them, and surrendered after brief resistance. By evening, our troops were patrolling the streets. The bigger problem after the gates fell was actually the Charlo refugees. They rioted, looting, and burning. They caused more casualties among our entering soldiers than the defending army had. But we dealt with this before. After hanging a few dozen rioters along the main streets, order was restored. I came from the Baron's tent where the two barons were still arguing about who broke through first. It was almost comical. We breached our gates at nearly the exact same time. I went to check on Solon. He was fine, just a scratch on the bridge of his nose, thanks to his strong combat energy and full plate armor. But Gelson had taken an arrow to the left side of his waist, just below where the half-body armor stops. A skilled archer had found the gap. With combat energy healing, he said he'd be fine in a week. Solon was pleased when I reported our company's losses. He liked that I was thorough and professional. He rewarded me with a length of smooth red fabric and, more importantly, another cutting of Red Sea flower. I cut it myself this time, taking half again more than last time. Solon carried this treasure even on campaign. Despite how casually he talked about it, this plant was clearly more valuable than he let on. I declined Solon's dinner invitation, saying I needed to check on Gelson. That actually made Solon happier. He values a subordinate who looks after comrades and superiors. Gelson outranks me by half a grade as the full commander, so showing him respect mattered. Gelson was recovering in a small courtyard with two soldiers attending him. He was emotional when I visited, insisting I sleep there tonight and swearing he'd take the front line next time while I guarded Solon. I laughed and agreed to everything. It was late when I left. The moon was already high. I turned down his offer to share the courtyard. Company commanders get their own private residence in captured cities, a courtesy from the Baron. I wanted a quiet place. The day's fighting had pushed my combat energy forward, and I needed time to absorb the gains. Walking through the streets, I heard our soldiers smashing into shops on both sides, the Baron's unspoken permission. Soldiers risk their lives. They deserve rewards. The shops along the main roads had been mostly cleaned out by their fleeing owners, but the men searched through rubble like treasure hunters. Finding a single gold coin would be a jackpot, 50 silver d'Urliers at the supply exchange. I used to be one of them. Back when I was a squad leader, I once led my boys through 3 entire streets in a single night. Now as a company commander, I didn't need to get my hands dirty. Squad leaders would bring me my share, and the Baron's cut from the city treasury and armory was the real prize. The treasury, weapons stores, and granary had been seized by our cavalry the moment we entered. The city lord's manor alone supposedly had porcelain worth several gold coins per piece. Hans, Kane, and the boys had learned my old looting techniques well. They'd eat plenty tonight. I needed to focus on finding a place to sleep and train. I walked down a dark alley behind the city lord's manor, a wealthy neighborhood. Nice houses. A red jujube wood door caught my eye. This one. I kicked it open and walked in. The previous owners had either fled or were hiding. Either way, this was my house now. The courtyard was suspiciously clean. A tree stood in the center, but no fallen leaves on the ground. That meant someone had been maintaining it. Either they left very recently, or they hadn't left at all. There were 2 rooms plus a gatekeeper's quarters. The gatehouse was empty. I drew my sword and entered the smaller room on the right, probably a servant's quarters. It smelled faintly of a woman's fragrance. A single bed, covers thrown aside in a hurry. Whoever lived here left in a rush. I backed out and approached the main room. Still quiet. If anyone was in this courtyard, they'd be in here. I walked to the door and pushed it open slowly. Pitch black inside. The moment the door swung fully open, a flash of silver sliced through the darkness toward me. My instinct screamed. I rolled forward and thrust my sword toward the flash of silver. Metal rang against metal. I pushed combat energy through my right hand to shake the weapon loose, but it held. Whoever this was had real strength. I shifted my weight and slammed my body into the attacker. A gasp, a woman's voice. I grabbed her throat with my right hand. Warm, smooth skin, but I didn't ease up. You don't go soft on a battlefield. Before I could get a look at her face, another figure lunged from ahead. I shoved my left hand forward and caught the second person. Moonlight crept through the doorway. My eyes adjusted. 2 beautiful faces stared back at me, one young, one mature. My left hand was gripping the older woman's chest. She was biting her lip, tears welling, enduring the pain. I'd grabbed with full force. After what felt like too long, I finally released her. She collapsed to the floor. The one in my right hand, the younger woman in servant's clothes, was worse off. Her eyes were rolling back, barely breathing. She'd blocked my combat energy-enhanced strike, which meant she had training. But she'd been choked for too long now. I held on until I was sure she was no longer a threat, then let go. She dropped and started coughing violently before passing out. During those coughs, I sensed something familiar, the same kind of energy state I feel when training. She had combat energy. In Charlo, Uncle Yashak had told me, only nobles or their servants learn combat energy. Unlike our army where you earn it through merit, Charlo keeps those secrets locked in noble families. Finding someone with combat energy on a battlefield means finding a walking treasure chest. Kill them and you'll find fine armor, good weapons, maybe jewelry. I looked at the unconscious servant. Plain maid's outfit, nothing special. No armor, no sword. But she wore a gold bracelet on her wrist. I slipped it off and pocketed it. Better than nothing. The older woman in the black dress, despite the dirt, I could tell the fabric was expensive. She was clearly the one in charge here. Who are you? I asked. We're just a local family. She's my maid, she said smoothly. Too smoothly. She recovered from her panic like someone trained in social situations. You're lying. An ordinary family's maid doesn't have combat energy, I said, fixing my eyes on her like needles. She flinched. She clearly wasn't used to a man staring her down like that. I could tell she hadn't recognized my combat energy earlier. In Charlo, common soldiers don't usually have it, so she probably thought I was just a strong officer. I was about to get rougher with my questioning. I've interrogated plenty of people on battlefields. Being pretty or being female doesn't earn any mercy from me. That's how I've stayed alive this long. Then a small voice broke the silence. Auntie, a little girl's whisper from somewhere deeper in the room. By morning, Franz City was still in chaos. Smoke hung in the air. Soldiers ransacked shops and houses. Crying, cursing, crashing, the soundtrack of a conquered city. At the city lord's manor, the two barons were arguing. The city lord escaped? Why didn't you tell me last night? Kashir roared loud enough to shake the walls. Just a city lord. What's the fuss? Kadochi replied coolly, dabbing his clothes with a handkerchief. Just a city lord? He's a marquis's son. His personal wealth might be worth half this city. An unwanted son. You still want more? Kashir tried to keep pushing, but Kadochi offered him an extra 10% from the armory and treasury. When Kashir reached for the granary too, Kadochi shut him down flat. Food was already split 50-50. That was agreed beforehand and non-negotiable. Kashir backed off. He knew the line. After Kashir left, Nightwile and the old butler appeared. The Baron asked what really happened at the North Gate. While reported that the city lord had broken out with about 50 cavalry, well-equipped, not far below our own veterans in quality. Worse, he'd had a mid-level knight squire and 2 low-level knight squires who fought Weil at the same time. The mid-level one took a full sword strike from Weil and kept fighting, some kind of death wish secret technique, buying time for the lord to escape. Even a high-level knight squire like Weil couldn't handle all three while also chasing the fleeing horsemen. But Weil's cavalry had intercepted 3 of the 5 wagons. One was full of gold coins, over 1,000. One held Charlo jewelry and crafts. One contained weapons and armor. The gold alone covered the entire cost of this siege. The jewelry and crafts were worth even more, though they'd need to be transported to Petersfield to convert into cash. Everything was hidden in the forest outside the city, under guard. The Baron nodded, satisfied. He'd let Kashir think the city lord got away with everything, then quietly kept the real prize for himself. As for me, I was standing in a dark room with a mysterious noblewoman, an unconscious combat energy-trained maid, and somewhere in the shadows, a little girl calling for her auntie. My night was far from over. That night, after Christine's sick voice called out for her auntie, and I watched the woman rush back to comfort the little girl despite her own pain, something softened in me. I left them alone and went to sleep in the other room. The city was crawling with our soldiers and Charlo rioters. Those 3 women weren't going anywhere. The next morning, I was sitting in the courtyard eating breakfast that my soldiers had brought. Meat pies and porridge, probably taken from some restaurant or rich man's kitchen. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, but they found me anyway. That's what power does. People want to please you. I was happy to accept. I was hungry, and I understood their thinking because I used to be one of them. The Baron's unspoken rule is that soldiers get 1 day to loot after taking a city. Technically, that ended last night, but one night isn't enough for a city of thousands. I hadn't received any orders yet to stop, and neither had the other commanders. So when the soldier who brought my food looked at me for a signal, I gave him a subtle nod. While I ate, 3 pairs of eyes watched me from the doorway. Then someone's stomach growled. Then another. Then a third. All 3 faces turned red. "Mister, I'm hungry," Christine said softly, peeking through the door crack. "Mister, I'm 18 years old." I looked at my calloused hands, pulled out 2 of my gray-white hairs, and stroked the stubble on my chin. "Am I really only 18? Come here, Christine. I can't finish all this alone," I said. That wasn't entirely true. Since training combat energy, my body burns through food faster, and I rarely feel full. But for a little girl, there was plenty. She wobbled out. Still sick, still unsteady on her feet. I felt a pang, walked over, and picked her up. She yelped, then found herself sitting in my lap, face going red. I thought the redness was from her illness. "Eat up. I'll get more if it's not enough." She nodded softly and started eating. This girl wasn't afraid of me, which was strange. I've killed somewhere between 50 and 100 people. Since learning combat energy, even grown men have trouble meeting my eyes. But Christine had been watching me from behind the door during my morning exercises, bright little eyes full of curiosity. She didn't eat much, just some of my leftover meat broth with a spoon and a quarter of one meat pie. Then she looked at the remaining food, looked back at the 2 women hiding behind the door frame, and turned to me with pleading eyes. I heard their stomachs growling too. Pretty embarrassing. I nodded. "Yay." She waved her little arms, kissed me on the cheek, grabbed the remaining pies, including her half-eaten one, and ran back to the room. I touched the wet spot on my face, stunned for a moment, then called after her. "From now on, call me Big Brother." Inside the room, I heard Grace scolding Christine for kissing a stranger. Something about being a noble and acting shameless. Christine's response was simple. "He's a good person, smart girl." She understood that in her situation, having someone strong and willing to protect them was more valuable than noble manners. The maid Rafi was awake now, but miserable. She'd failed to protect her mistress and lost her gold bracelet, her mother's keepsake, meant to be her dowry someday. She figured it fell off during the fight and planned to look for it. It was actually in my pocket, but she didn't need to know that. I told them not to wander outside and left. The city was still being picked clean. Resistance had been crushed on the first night, but refugees remained a headache. You can't push them too hard or risk a mass riot. Our soldiers knew the rules: target wealthy homes and middle-class families, leave the poor alone. The refugees would swarm in after our soldiers left, stripping everything bare. They were more thorough and desperate than we were. I saw one scene that stuck with me. A soldier was walking with a jar of something, pickled vegetables, probably. A real luxury when you eat black bread every day. A refugee accidentally bumped into him, and the jar shattered on the ground. The soldier drew his sword and slashed the refugee across the back without a word, then cursed and walked away. The other refugees just watched with that familiar look of fear and acceptance. They knew the rules too. It was the refugees' fault for being careless. No riot over that. Just sad. I sighed. Gyula spotted me and jogged over. Since the siege, he'd become one of my inner circle alongside Hans and Kane. He'd been skeptical of me at first. I'm leaner than most commanders, but watching me charge up that ladder changed his mind. "Boss, I've got something good," he whispered with a sly look. He led me through the rubble to a rundown gate with 2 of his men standing guard. Inside, a smoky room held several filthy, trembling people and some crates. Gyula started making suggestive faces at me, gesturing between me and the people on the floor. I immediately kicked him. I thought he'd captured civilian women for entertainment. I've done plenty of bad things in 4 years of war, but I have principles. I've never touched a civilian woman by force. I can say that with a clear conscience. Gyula quickly realized the misunderstanding and shouted, "Boss, they're not women." I looked more closely at the people squatting on the floor. Faces smeared with dirt, filthy hair, ragged gray clothes. You couldn't tell if they were men or women at first glance. Gyula grinned and explained. These were black market smugglers. He'd spotted them acting suspicious during the siege, rounded them up with his boys, and hit the jackpot. He kicked open one of the wooden crates. Jewelry and gold and silver coins glittered inside. Now I understood. There's an unwritten rule for big finds like this. 50% goes up. 20 to the battalion, 30 to the company commander, and the soldiers split what's left. The reason is simple. Common soldiers can't move large amounts of goods on their own, and hoarding a fortune creates tension between soldiers and officers. Better to share and keep things smooth. This kind of score is rare for regular troops, though. Most wealthy people flee before we arrive, and any who don't get caught by the Baron's cavalry. The Baron lets soldiers loot freely, but he won't tolerate them cutting into his share. A soldier who steals from the Baron's pocket won't see the next sunrise. I told Gulas to handle the military share through logistics, convert my cut to d'Urliers, and split the goods between the Baron's caravan and the merchant Henry. I'd promised Henry my business, but I wasn't foolish enough to give him everything. Keeping the Baron's people happy was just common sense. The smugglers' leader was a scrawny man named Kebe, terrified but sharp-tongued. He claimed to be a well-known merchant in France City and begged for his life, promising he could bring me great wealth. Gulas scoffed at calling a smuggler a merchant, but I was interested, not in his talents, but in his network. Smugglers work in chains. These were the collectors. Somewhere there were buyers. Following that thread could lead to something bigger. Kebe got desperate and said he had an eye for valuables. Years working in jewelry shops and pawn shops had given him real expertise. I pulled out the gold bracelet I'd taken from the maid last night and handed it to him. He wiped his hands on his shirt, examined it carefully in the light, even flicked it with his finger. Then a flash of contempt crossed his face, subtle, but I caught it. His verdict: it wasn't real gold. The weight was close because silver had been mixed in with copper, then coated in gold powder on the surface. Worth 5 Charlot silver coins at most. Converted to d'Urliers, maybe 1 or 2. My mood soured. I'd been hoping those women had serious wealth. Though this was just the maid's bracelet, maybe the others had better things. I told myself not to get discouraged yet. Gulas read my mood instantly and kicked Kebe, telling him to show me the best stuff from his collection. Kebe scrambled through the crates and pulled out a pair of fine earrings and a dark green bracelet. The earrings were exquisite. The diamonds alone were worth a fortune. Kebe said they'd been pawned by what he suspected was a noblewoman. He'd rarely seen jewelry this fine in his entire career. The bracelet was made from cloud ink gemstone, a material normally used for high-end rings. Using enough of it for an entire bracelet meant the original stone must have been enormous. I took both items without comment and left, telling Gulas to keep Kebe alive. I had plans for him. The city was still chaotic. I checked on my old squad. Hans was leading the boys through a general store. Kane was sitting on a rooftop staring at nothing. That's how he always is during looting. He once told me that watching Charlot civilians reminds him of his years as a beggar. He never participates, but the squad always gives him his share anyway. Everyone respects that about him. Around noon, the Baron's order finally came down. Stop looting. All units assemble in the West District. That area had been flattened by Kashir's mage, so it was clean ground, perfect for setting up camp. The soldiers had been up all night fighting and scavenging. The moment they gathered, most collapsed and fell asleep wherever they dropped. I ran into an old acquaintance from Kashir's battalion, Sean, a squad leader I'd fought alongside before. He congratulated me on my promotion and invited me for drinks that evening. He'd scored some good wine last night. I accepted. From now until tomorrow afternoon, we'd likely have no duties. My wounds from yesterday were already healing thanks to combat energy. After making the rounds, I headed back to my courtyard carrying a chicken Hans had given me. Good old Hans. The maid Rafi was sweeping the yard but looked distracted and upset. Christine was sitting in the doorway, playing with her fingers. Her color was better, her illness improving. Grace was probably inside. They hadn't tried to run. Smart. I was certain they couldn't make it out of this city. The maid's combat skills were mediocre at best. Rafi tensed up when she saw me, but I walked past her without a word and tossed the chicken at her. Know how to prepare this? Yes, she said, looking dazed. Big brother. Christine called out happily when she spotted me. I ruffled her hair. I'd grown fond of the little girl. Normally, captured Charlot nobles get turned in for bounty money. But I wasn't planning on doing that. They still hadn't admitted who they really were, but I didn't care. I'd claimed these 3 women, and that was that. A noble woman for a wife. The thought gave me a little thrill. Not Christine, of course. Grace. Grace was sitting inside. She could probably guess my intentions. She'd seen that look in men's eyes before. But she had no options. She'd asked Rafi about my strength, and the maid confirmed I was nearly as strong as their old butler. Grace couldn't believe someone my age could be close to a low-level night squire. When my soldier brought lunch, extra portions as I'd ordered, we all sat at the stone table in the courtyard. Rafi turned out to be a decent cook. She'd made a good chicken soup from the bird Hans gave me, even without proper seasoning. Christine hopped into my lap without hesitation. The scent of a young girl surrounded me. I shifted uncomfortably, but didn't push her away. Instead, I thought, so this is what power and strength bring you. My desire to get stronger only grew. Rafi was shy about eating with us, but gave in to the smell of food. Grace came out without fuss. The four of us sitting together like a family, strange as it was. During the meal, I asked Rafi directly if she trained in combat energy. She went quiet. Grace answered for her. Yes, Rafi practiced their family's combat technique. I caught something in how she said it. Their family had multiple combat energy methods. Baron Kadochi only has one. Interesting. Grace tried to make a deal. She said if I could get them out of the city, she'd repay me generously. I tapped the table. You're my captives now. Your wealth is my wealth. I don't need your repayment. Rafi had combat energy, sure, but her fighting instincts were terrible. I could beat her with one hand. She was a sheltered servant, not a battlefield survivor. Christine smoothed things over as only she could, calling me Big Brother, until my heart melted. This girl had grown up mostly alone, parents too important and busy to raise her. I was the strong protector who appeared when she was sick and helpless. She didn't care about which kingdom I served. She just liked feeling safe. After lunch, Rafi cleaned up while Grace and Christine watched me train. I took out the Red Sea flower cutting from Solon, wrapped it in combat energy, crushed it to powder in my palm, and swallowed it. Then I began circulating my energy. My belly burned. I knew to expect this from last time. 2 hours later, my combat energy vortex had grown by another third, though the effect was weaker than the first dose. I was now at half a soybean in size, roughly half of Uncle Yashak's total reserves. He'd been training for over a year. I'd been training for days. Entry-level Knight Squire has no bottleneck. It's purely about building volume. When the vortex reaches thumb size, you break through to low level. Simple concept. But most people never get there. They either can't keep up the daily practice or their natural talent isn't suited for absorbing energy. People like me and Uncle Yashak, who earned our right to train through military merit, have no way to test our aptitude. We just grind. The diminishing returns from Red Sea flower didn't surprise me. If it kept working at full strength forever, Solon wouldn't have plateaued at peak entry level. Still, it was worth asking him for more whenever I could. After training, I practiced weapons for an hour, then toweled off the sweat. Christine stared at my chest with her face turning pink. Rafi looked distracted, as she had all day. I pulled the gold bracelet from my pocket and tossed it to Rafi. She fumbled to catch it, then gasped. Where did you find this? Picked it up off the ground, I said without blinking. Thank you. Thank you. She clutched it to her chest. This is the only thing my mother left me. Something stirred in me. Don't lose it again, I said gruffly. Grace watched the whole exchange. After a moment, she said, I can see you're a good person. Can you let us go? If I let you go, do you think you'd survive out there? I replied. She knew the answer. 3 women alone in a war-torn country. No protection, no resources, danger everywhere. If you could send us across the border to another kingdom, impossible. I cut her off. I'm just a company commander. I don't have that kind of power. You're Charlot, I'm Faustin. You're my war prize. I have no obligation to help you. Tears welled in her eyes. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this before. Christine tugged her aunt's sleeve. It's okay, Auntie. Being with Big Brother is nice. I didn't know who Grace really was yet, just that she was some noble's woman. As a commoner who'd never been close to nobility, keeping her had a certain dark appeal. I'd always looked up at the noble class from below. Now I had one sitting in my courtyard. Franz City became Faustin-occupied territory. The Baron ordered the remaining garrison and supply trains from Giza town to relocate here. The city's wealth needed to be transported back to the kingdom. A few days later, Xiaxi arrived. I put her in the main bedroom with me. The 3 women moved to the side room. Xiaxi was prickly about them at first, but once she saw I hadn't touched any of them, she relaxed. Henry the merchant came too. My soldiers had given him half of their loot to handle, so he'd done well this round. He also brought tribute from Xiaxi's ex-husband, the local boss back in Giza town. I now had about 200 silver coins, most from the siege. The higher you climb, the more you receive. I felt that truth deeper every day. I asked Henry to find me a blacksmith who could forge a shield. My half-armor and regulation sword were fine for now, but my defense needed work. During the siege, I'd taken a direct hit from a boulder. The broken shield I'd been carrying shattered on impact. A shield? No problem. Henry slapped his belly. I wanted an armed shield, small, strapped to the forearm, but extremely solid. In siege warfare, a good shield saves your life and doubles as a weapon. You can block with it and bash someone's skull in the same motion. Henry said he knew a good smith in Petersfield and would handle everything. He left with the supply caravan. After every battle, soldiers rest while merchants get busy. He promised my shield in 2 weeks. Word came down. We have half a month to reach the town of Rimosa, just outside Intel City. Military command wants Intel taken within that time to crush Charlot's remaining strength for good. That evening, I called Hans over and gave him instructions. He took a squad and disappeared into the night. Giza town after dark was a ghost town. Broken buildings, collapsed roofs, only faint sounds proving anyone was still alive. Xiaxi's ex-husband Hagen had been living well lately. He figured his ex-wife's connection to me made him untouchable. He was drunk, stumbling down the road to visit one of his women, kicking beggars out of his way. A shadow stepped into his path. Before Hagen could finish his curse, a short blade found his throat. Hans stood over him, expressionless. Hagen tried to speak, eyes wide, finger pointing, then went still. Hans's men cleaned up quickly. They took the head and vanished into the night. Beggars crept forward afterward and stripped the headless body of everything, even fighting over a single coin found in a pocket. The corpse was kicked into some forgotten corner. In a basement beneath Giza town, a few dozen starving people huddled around a small fire. Hans walked in and tossed Hagen's head on the ground. He told the leader, the same middle-aged man who'd tried to rob Xiaxi's tavern all those weeks ago, that the town's underground was his now. But monthly payments had to be 20% higher than what Hagen delivered. Otherwise, the head on the floor was his future. The man agreed immediately. After Hans left, his people erupted with excitement. They'd been suffering since I'd beaten them up at the tavern. Once I became a company commander, even more people had given them trouble. Now they had a chance. The middle-aged man was no fool. He'd been a small merchant once. He didn't care that the opportunity came from someone he could call an enemy. Survival has no pride. He resolved to do well and avoid Hagen's fate. Back in France City, things had calmed down. The looting was over. Charlot civilians began appearing on the streets, though they still moved like frightened animals. I took Xiaxi for a walk through the city. She'd never seen a place this big. Neither of us had much to look at, though. The only shops open were supply stores run by our battalion's merchants and cashiers. They sold one thing, food. And the food was something called coal cakes, black lumps with carbon particles on the surface. If bran cakes are made from grain husks, coal cakes are made from what's scraped off the bottom of the pot after bran cakes are cooked. Even rats wouldn't touch them. But Charlot civilians lined up for them desperately, trading jewelry, coins, weapons, anything, for this garbage. I've eaten coal cakes before. They burn your throat, make your stomach ache, have zero nutrition, and leave you weak after a few days. You wouldn't even feed them to horses. But city people have no other option. In the countryside, you can forage in fields and forests. In a city, unless you have a fruit tree in your yard, there's nothing. The merchants on our side recognized me and nodded as I passed. At one of Kashir's shops, I spotted Sean, the squad leader I'd had drinks with, roughing up a refugee who'd tried to steal food. "Rock, what brings you here?" he called out. I was an unusual company commander, I'll admit. Others spent their time training at home, enjoying themselves, or networking with officers. I wandered the streets talking to regular soldiers and poking around. Jelson said I hadn't adjusted to a commander's lifestyle. Solon said I just liked being around people. Only Uncle Yashak got it right. Rock is developing his influence in his own way. He was right. The other commanders climbed upward, courting equals and flattering superiors. I understood that game but wasn't natural at it yet, so I chose a different path. I invested downward. The squad leaders who are nobody today will be somebody tomorrow. I made friends with squad leaders outside my company, even in Kashir's battalion. I took over Giza town's underground. The money was small now, but that town sits on a major trade route. Give it time. I never dismiss anyone's future value. Sean spotted Xiaxi on my arm and grinned. So this is the missus? Good taste, big brother. Then he yelled to one of his caravan workers. Dark. That silver bracelet from yesterday. Bring it out for the lady. A sharp-eyed kid ran over and handed it to me respectfully. I turned it over in my hands. Genuine quality. Then passed it to Xiaxi. Her eyes lit up. It was her first piece of real jewelry. I patted Sean's shoulder in thanks. Xiaxi had been envious of Grace's blue sapphire necklace and Rafi's gold bracelet for days. Now she had something of her own, and she couldn't stop turning it on her wrist, admiring the shine. Watching her joy made me wonder if I'd been neglecting her. I remembered the earrings I'd taken from the smuggler Kebe, the ones he said were finer than almost anything he'd ever handled. I'd originally planned to save them for my sister someday. But Xiaxi was here now. I pulled the earrings from my pocket and placed them in her palm. Do you like them? I asked. If the silver bracelet was nobility among jewelry, these earrings were royalty. Elegant curves, brilliant diamonds, a true masterpiece. That afternoon, Xiaxi rushed to get Rafi to help her put on the earrings. In Charlo, earrings were a noble privilege. Commoners weren't even allowed to pierce their ears. But with the kingdom crumbling, who cared about those rules anymore? Rafi recognized the earrings the moment she saw them. They belonged to Grace, pawned to smugglers when the money ran out. She said nothing and quietly helped Xiaxi put them on. At dinner, Xiaxi showed off her new jewelry, twirling her wrist to flash the silver bracelet and tilting her head to display the earrings. Christine stared for a long time, then started to say, "That's Auntie's." But Grace quickly patted her head and cut her off, simply complimenting how nice they looked. Xiaxi beamed and pressed closer to me. Christine immediately got competitive and climbed onto my other side. I ate dinner one-handed with a woman leaning on my left shoulder and a girl sitting in my lap. Painful and wonderful at the same time. Grace casually asked where the earrings came from. I told her a smuggler gave them to me. She nodded like she'd already guessed. That night, Xiaxi showed her gratitude enthusiastically. Grace and the others slept poorly, as they had every night since Xiaxi moved in. The walls weren't thick enough. 2 days later, we marched again. The Baron held several meetings to lay out the plan, reached the regiment headquarters at Connor City within a week, then joined the full Eagle Legion before Intel City within 2 weeks. Intel City is the second largest city in Charlo after the capital Otis. Its walls are reportedly over 20 meters high, and it holds the last of Charlo's elite troops. That's why resistance had been so light since we broke through Felmer Canyon. The enemy pulled all their professional soldiers back to Intel, Ellis, and the capital for a final stand. The entire Eagle Legion, 30,000 men across 6 brigades, would converge for this assault. This would be a real battle. I didn't dare take it lightly. I kept Xiaxi and the others in the supply train behind us. I wasn't going to leave Xiaxi in France City. Occupied cities often riot once the army leaves. As for Grace, she was my property, best kept close. Grace and her group wore veils to avoid attracting attention. Grace's beauty would have caused problems. The supply workers knew these were my women. The only gossip was that other commanders had 2 women at most, while I had 4 plus a child. When the other commanders heard, they just laughed. Youth has its advantages. The march was safe. With Charlo's regular forces destroyed, only scattered bandits remained, and they wouldn't dare show themselves near a Faustin column. Christine asked Grace why there were no bad people on the road. Because wolves only bully sheep, Grace told her. When they see a lion, they run. I brought the smuggler Kebe along, putting him to work with the supply train alongside Xiaxi's brother. He proved useful. He could identify valuable items among our loot, and he had connections in the towns ahead. The 2 barons planned to steamroll through several small towns and 2 cities on the way to the rally point. After the rich haul from France City, they weren't interested in small pickings. But we company commanders were. I privately arranged with Uncle Yashak to jointly raid one of the towns. Each of us took 50 men and cleaned out a small town of several hundred people. Other commanders couldn't resist either and hit their own targets. The Baron turned a blind eye. He understood that good leadership means giving your people room to operate. As long as results are positive, minor deviations are acceptable. I limited myself to one town. Uncle Yashak taught me that taking too much breeds resentment from your peers. Kebe earned his keep by leading us straight to his fellow smugglers' stashes in these towns. War profiteers and black market dealers live, well, even in chaos, and raiding their operations yielded real returns. I promised Keberi his freedom once the total haul reached 100 gold coins, about 50 gold durliers. Not a small sum. From my 200 silver durliers, I'd sent 50 home through the caravan. My parents and sister probably didn't need that much, but sending money home is what every soldier does. The rest I gave to Xiaxi to manage. She proved her business mind immediately. She invested 150 silver durliers into a share of the supply caravan under my name. The amount was pocket change to the caravan managers, but coming from a company commander, even a small investment demanded respect. This meant I'd earn dozens or even hundreds of silver durliers after every battle going forward. Passive income that would only grow. That was Xiaxi's brilliance. With one move, she'd set up a revenue stream that would outlast any single raid. Early morning, 5 of us slipped out of camp. Me, Kane, Hans, Gulas, and Kebe the smuggler. We headed back the way we'd come, toward a Charlo city we'd passed earlier. It was deep autumn now, bitterly cold mornings. The army only marched from noon to evening these days. We were less than 2 days from reaching the regiment headquarters at Bimmer City, so I used the free morning for business. Our destination was Valier City, a small place, maybe 2,000 residents, but with one remarkable feature: walls nearly 10 meters high, almost as tall as a mid-sized city's. The previous lord, Baron Abek, had built them, and other Charlo nobles had laughed at him for it. Now those same nobles were kicking themselves. Those tall walls were the only reason Valier hadn't fallen. It had become a safe harbor for wealthy Charlo merchants and refugees. I wasn't going there to raid. I was going to trade. The small-town smugglers we'd caught during our march had only carried basic goods, grain and Charlo coins, nothing exciting. Kebe, realizing I wasn't going to set him free anytime soon, offered a better idea. Visit Valier's black market. Every city has underground merchants, bandits, smugglers, hustlers. You can buy things there that don't exist on the regular market. Kebe had worked in black markets before and knew how they operated. His plan was simple but clever. Charlo is dying, and everyone with half a brain knows it. Our durlier is hard currency now. In our own supply caravans, the exchange rate between durliers and Charlo coins is 2 to 1. But in Charlo territory, desperate people will trade 5 Charlo coins for 1 durlier. Buy Charlo coins cheap with durliers here, then convert them back through our caravan at 2 to 1. Pure profit. I'd brought all the durliers from our recent town raid, plus 400 silver durliers borrowed from Uncle Yashak. Hans and Gulas had bulging money belts strapped under their shirts. I brought my 3 best fighters as insurance. Not that I expected trouble, but in a black market, you never know. Between us, we could handle anything short of an army. We reached Valier City by early morning. The walls were impressive but battered. On the western face, a huge crater in the stone stood out. Baron Kashir's mage had blasted that as a warning when our army passed yesterday. That crater gave the Charlo defenders nightmares and gave us confidence. The gate was barely cracked open. A long line of refugees stretched dozens of meters out. At this pace, we'd never make it back by noon. I frowned at Kebe. He puffed up his chest. Watch me. He strolled to the gate, whispered to a guard, and slipped coins into the man's pocket. The guard's hand felt the weight, gave his colleagues a look, and patted Kebe's shoulder. Done. Kebe waved us forward. Some refugees glared at us for cutting the line. A couple of hot-tempered ones looked ready to start something, but Hans fixed them with a single stare, and they went quiet. Then they noticed what they were looking at. Hans at nearly 2 meters tall, Gulas equally massive, and even Kane and I stood around 5'11". No one in that crowd of starving, hollowed-out people could match any of us. Gulas crossed his arms and snorted at the crowd. They scattered like they'd seen a wild beast. At the gate, the guards recognized we weren't ordinary civilians. They gripped their spears tight. Soldiers can always feel the killing aura on people who've taken lives, and we had plenty. Kebe talked fast and kept feeding the lead guard more coins until the man finally lowered his weapon and waved us through. The spear tips still pointed vaguely in our direction. Don't cause trouble, the guard warned. Gulas answered with an eye roll. Inside, Valier was even more wrecked than France City. Refugees covered every surface. Not a single shop was open. I told Kebe to lead the way. He explained that every city's black market sits in the most chaotic area, and nothing was more chaotic right now than the slums. We walked through a maze of makeshift shelters. The people around us wore rags that barely covered their bodies, hair matted, faces gray, eyes hollow. A beggar stumbled toward me, begging for food, saying he hadn't eaten in 3 days. Kane intercepted him before he got close. Just a small moment on the road. But I noticed the beggar had stopped because he was clutching a copper coin that had appeared in his hand, and only Kane had been close enough to slip it to him. That's Kane, the softest heart in my squad, hidden behind a scout's cold face. We stopped at a black wooden shack guarded by 4 thugs holding wooden clubs and iron picks. The only weapons civilians were allowed in the city. Merchants and rich people had been so terrorized that they banned real weapons from common hands. The 4 guards took one look at Gulas and Hans and didn't even try to stop us. We walked straight in. Inside wasn't much, maybe 200 square feet. But that wasn't the real market. In the center of the floor was a staircase leading down. What's this? I'd never seen an underground passage like it. A basement, sir, Kebe explained. They say it was originally built by a mage. This was only the second thing I'd ever seen created by magic, the first being the sofa in Solon's tent. Kebe said there was a larger black market on the streets, but our identities made it better to stay out of sight. This underground one was smaller, but dealt in quality goods and high-value clients. For a currency exchange, we didn't need anything bigger. Torches lined the walls as we descended. The staircase wasn't long, but being underground made the darkness feel heavy. None of us minded. We'd all seen worse in the dark. At the bottom of the stairs, a space of about 400 square meters opened up before us, lit by torches on all walls. No buildings, just rows of stalls selling everything: grain, weapons, slaves. A group of tattooed thugs lounged near the entrance, showing off their muscles and ink like a sign that read, "We're dangerous." They were the black market security. I scanned them quickly. 2 or 3 had sharp eyes and carried themselves like fighters, roughly third-class private strength. The rest were nothing. Hans noticed the same thing. "Those 2 have third-class ability," he whispered. Kane shrugged. Not bad for a black market. He'd been training like crazy lately, stung by Hans getting promoted to both squad leader and second-class private. He was nearly at second-class level himself now, so the confidence was earned. Gulas didn't say a word. He just eyed the thugs like a cat watching birds. His fists were probably itching. Kebe led us to the center where the biggest dealer operated, a small 30-square-meter room with a single counter. Behind it sat a man in his 60s or 70s, dry-voiced and sharp-eyed. The room had no goods on display, just shelves with paper tags listing inventory. 20 or 30 categories, mostly grain and basic supplies. A few daggers and short swords. No armor at all. Kebe handled the talking, as we'd planned. "Old man, I've brought you the deal of your life. Question is whether you can handle it." He signaled Hans and Gulas, who pulled out the heavy money bags and slammed them on the counter. The old man had been dismissive of Kebe, but the heavy thud of real money got his attention fast. He peeled open a bag, and silver d'Urliers gleamed back at him. He pulled out several coins and bit them to test. Charlot coins are 6 parts silver to 3 parts other metal plus impurities. Foston d'Urliers are 5-5, but much purer, so they're harder. An experienced dealer can tell immediately. "What are you looking for?" he asked, suddenly serious. "Silver coins. All of it converted to Charlot silver coins," Kebe said. "Gold coins if you have them." The old man laughed at the mention of gold. He didn't have that kind of reach. If he had, 400 d'Urliers could potentially net US around 2,000 silver coins, roughly 20 gold coins. Even at 18 gold coins, it would have been incredible. Gold doesn't lose value the way silver does. 18 gold coins would be worth at least 2,000 d'Urliers back at our supply exchange, turning 400 into 2,000, a 1,600 d'Urlier profit. But gold wasn't available. Silver was. The old man clapped his hands, whispered to a black-robed servant, and within minutes 4 big guards carried in a much larger bag. Kebe opened it, all silver coins. The deal went smoothly. No one tried to rob us on the way out. Hans and Gulas's size probably helped with that. We hurried back to camp without incident. We'd exchanged our 400 d'Urliers for nearly 2,000 Charlot silver coins. The haul was too large to dump at the supply exchange all at once without drawing attention. So I took out 700 coins and had Hans deliver them to Uncle Yashak. His loan had been 200 durliers. 700 silver coins were worth nearly double that. Good for repaying the favor with interest. The remaining coins I'd sell off gradually over the coming days. I don't have grand ambitions. Before, I just wanted to survive. Now I want to live well. When the war ends, I want to have enough saved for my family and me to never worry again. Buy a small estate in the Baron's territory and live in peace. That's my dream. These 1,000+ coins brought me one step closer. That evening, the army camped beside a forest. I sat on my horse chewing on a dry twig, looking at the tree line and wondering if there might be magical creatures in there. Uncle Yashak rode up beside me. We're on the southwest edge of the Bering Mountains. This forest is part of the range. He could read my mind. I know you want to hunt magical creatures to get stronger, but take my advice. Build your combat energy reserves first. The rest can wait. I nodded. He didn't know about the Red Sea flower from Solon. I wasn't about to tell anyone. Between a month of hard daily training and 2 doses of the flower, my combat energy had reached nearly 2/3 of Uncle Yashak's level. Only I knew that. The Bering Mountains are part of the Morphe Forest, Uncle Yashak continued. We should reach Bimmer City on the northwest side the day after tomorrow. Another hard battle coming when the Legion assembles, I said. Winter's almost here, he replied, his voice heavy. If this war drags another year, even iron soldiers will break. He was old enough to see what others missed. The kingdom was being hollowed out from the inside. We've been moving fast. We might be the first battalion to reach regiment headquarters, I said, snapping my reins toward camp. Probably, Uncle Yashak called after me with a grin. I know you've made good money. When we get to headquarters, look around. They've got things worth buying there. The autumn sunset hung on the clouds, beautiful, but giving no warmth. A cold wind swept through, and dead leaves drifted from the bare branches above. Back home in Maple Leaf Village, deep in the south of Foston's Dare province, life went on without me. My sister Lia was washing clothes by the river, even though autumn had turned the water cold enough to turn her hands white. She wore a white silk ribbon in her hair, one she'd bought this year because of a single message I'd sent through the Baron's caravan. Just a few words asking her to buy something nice for herself. She bought 2 ribbons, a white one and a blue-green one. That's my sister. She understood exactly what I meant. Aunt Mary from next door, Hans's mother, called Lia home for dinner. They walked together through the village, chatting. Aunt Mary praised me, saying I was the most successful young man from our village, already a squad leader in just a few years. She said Hans only got where he was because of me. Lia went quiet for a moment at the mention of my name, then smiled and said Hans was doing well too. The village was mostly old people and women now. Almost every young man had gone to war. Lia reached our house, a tiny wooden hut with a simple new gate, recently repaired. My father, Old Rock, was squatting on a stump in the yard, smoking his pipe. His hair had gone gray-white. Lia scolded him about the smoking, as she always did. He coughed twice and put it away, muttering he didn't have many years left anyway. She set down the laundry and sat behind him, gently tapping his back. Nothing beats having a daughter, he sighed contentedly. He always said the 2 best things he ever did were adopting Lia, his sister's child, and having me. Only he, my mother, and a few village elders know Lia isn't his biological daughter. My mother Tia came out with dinner, flatbread, a few corn cobs, and soup made from corn water with some wild greens mixed in. Simple food. Without my monthly money, they might not even have this much. Our house is 20 square meters total, split into 3 parts. A tiny kitchen, my parents' bedroom, and the room Lia and I shared. 2 beds, a stove, and nothing else. No room to eat indoors. Like most families in the village, they ate outside in the yard, sitting on small stools around a tree stump. 3 stools surrounded the stump. One spot sat empty. That was mine. They ate quietly. My father gnawed a corn cob and slurped soup. Lia and my mother nibbled their bread in small, gentle bites. Grain prices went up again in town, my mother said. Without a young man to work our 2 acres of land, what my aging father and the 2 women could grow barely kept them from starving. They need to buy grain, and that takes money. Whatever the price, nobody has extra food, my father replied. Then he asked how much was left from the money I sent last month. My mother said she'd saved half, and still had 30 copper dlerliers from the other half. It would last until the Baron's caravan came again. My father went quiet. The caravan brought money, but it also brought death notices. Too many young men from our village left and never came back. Every time the caravan approached, my parents felt the same awful split, hoping it carried my money, dreading it might carry news of my death. My mother steered the conversation somewhere brighter. She said I'd been sending good money, especially since my promotion to squad leader. The family had enough saved. Maybe it was time to find me a wife. My father nodded eagerly. His boy was 18, doing well in the Baron's army. A good wife was overdue. After dinner, Leah helped clean up. My father checked the gate, put away the farm tools, and carried the 3 little stools inside. Darkness came fast in late autumn. Most families were already in bed. Leah said goodnight to our parents and went to her room. 7 or 8 square meters. 2 thin wooden beds. A small half-meter cabinet that served as both her wardrobe and her treasure box. The silk ribbons, handkerchiefs she'd sewn herself. She untied the white ribbon from her hair and placed it carefully in the cabinet beside the blue-green one. She ran her fingers over the silk for a moment, then blushed for some reason and put it back. She lay on her bed and looked at the empty one beside hers. My bed. The room felt hollow without me in it. She thought about the mischievous, stubborn little boy she used to hold while he slept. She wrapped her arms around nothing, hugging the air where I used to be, and thought of me until sleep came. I wasn't there, but I know my family. I know them so well I can picture exactly how their evenings go. My sister Leah would be washing clothes by the river, even in the cold, her hands turning white. She'd be wearing one of the silk ribbons I asked her to buy. I know she got them because the caravan man told me. 2 ribbons, one white, one blue-green. That's Leah. She does exactly what I ask, nothing more, nothing less. Aunt Mary, Hans's mother, would walk her home, bragging about me being a squad leader and saying Hans only got where he is because of me. Leah would go quiet when my name comes up, then change the subject. My father, Old Rock, would be sitting on a tree stump in the yard, smoking his pipe despite Leah telling him to stop. He's not even 40 yet, but years of backbreaking work have made him look ancient. He always says the 2 best things he ever did were adopting Leah. She's actually his sister's daughter, though only he, my mother, and a few village elders know that, and having me. My mother Tia would bring out dinner, flatbread, a few corn cobs, and soup made from corn water with wild greens. Simple food. Without my money, they might not even have that. Our house is 20 square meters, kitchen, parents' bedroom, and the room Leah and I shared. 2 beds, a stove, nothing else. They eat outside because there's no space indoors. 3 stools around the stump. 1 empty. Mine. Grain prices keep climbing. They have no young man to properly work the land. What my aging father and 2 women can grow barely keeps them alive. My mother said she'd saved half of what I sent last month, with 30 copper dlerliers left from the rest. Every time the Baron's caravan approaches the village, my parents feel the same dread. It brings money, but it also brings death notices. Too many village boys left and never returned. My parents hope for my coins and fear for my life with every visit. My mother brought up finding me a wife. I'm 18 now, well past marrying age for a commoner. My father agreed eagerly. They have ambitions. Leah is beautiful, and they dreamed of marrying her to a merchant's son or the town mayor's boy, someone who could give her a comfortable life. Now they're thinking the same way about me. A squad leader could attract a decent merchant family's daughter. What they don't say out loud, what they discuss only in whispers after dark, lying on their bed, is something else entirely. My mother brought it up. She said they both know what's in my heart. The messages I send home, always asking about Leah, always telling her to buy nice things. Leah's reactions when my name comes up. Year after year, the same pattern. Leah isn't their biological daughter. My father's sister gave her to them to raise. They've loved her as their own, but they're not blind. They can see what's growing between us, something Leah and I haven't even recognized ourselves. My father mumbled in the dark that he'd heard the village chief say nobles do this kind of thing all the time. Baron Kadochi's second wife is supposedly his cousin. We're commoners, not nobles, my mother shot back. She runs the household, and my father listens to her because he loves her and feels guilty about the hard life she's endured beside him. We'll talk about it when Rock comes home, he said, ending the topic before Leah might overhear. Will he come home? My mother asked quietly, her head on his arm. Don't start that again. You know how capable our boy is. He'll come back alive. Now sleep. We need to dig up the sweet potatoes tomorrow. Meanwhile, in her tiny room, Liao was lying on her bed staring at the empty one beside hers. My bed. She carefully put away her ribbon, ran her fingers over the silk, blushed, and pulled her hand back. She wrapped her arms around the empty air where I used to sleep when we shared a bed as children, her playing both sister and mother, holding me through the night. I think about those days sometimes. The summers when I caught tiny fish in the irrigation ditch while my family worked the fields. The evenings when I'd sit on a rock by the big maple tree at the village entrance, watching for Leah's blue headscarf to appear on the road from town. She'd come back from selling her handmade linen scarves and handkerchiefs, and I'd run to her and search her pockets. She'd make me wait, teasing me, then open her hand to reveal a few golden brown sweet fruits. I was so happy. She was already beautiful at 10. Matchmakers started coming to our door. I threw tantrums every time, making scenes in front of the visitors until they left in disgust. Partly that's why her marriage got delayed. People gave me strange looks and muttered uncomfortable things as they walked away. Then the drought came. 2 years of disaster. Fields died. My parents aged a decade in weeks. Leah stopped eating her share of black bread, so I could have more. She went 3 weeks without it before I even noticed. I never complained about being hungry, not once, because I saw that Liao wasn't complaining either. Next door, little Hans screamed at his parents every day about missing his bread. I couldn't do that to my family. The food went from wheat porridge to bran cakes to wild vegetable soup to chewing tree roots. And then one hot night, I left. Come back alive, Liao whispered through her tears. I wonder if she still says that every night before she falls asleep. I didn't know any of this at the time. It was only much later that pieces of the story reached me through rumors and camp talk. While I was marching toward Bimmer City, something was happening back in the Foston capital, Floral City. King Foston IX was smashing expensive Eastern porcelain in his palace, screaming at a man in black kneeling on the floor. Princess Angelina, the king's most beloved daughter, had snuck out of the palace and headed for the front lines to find her older brother, Prince Kensel. She'd managed to slip past the royal guards, and the king was furious. He demanded to know how this was possible. The man in black said the princess had insisted and he couldn't stop her. The queen, the king's second wife, tried to calm him down, but her interference only made the king angrier. He suspected she was behind the whole thing. The queen was the sister of Marquis Kent from the Legia Alliance to the south, a political marriage. The king didn't trust her. Princess Angelina only had basic magical ability, a low-level magic apprentice. She'd left with just one squad of shadow guards protecting her. The king ordered 4 more squads sent after her immediately, stripping the capital of most of its secret protection. His advisors protested. This would leave the capital and the king himself vulnerable. The king shut them down with a single statement. With that one here, the capital and I are safe. He was talking about someone named Rome Knight, who had apparently reached the threshold of true knighthood, a level of power that made one person worth an army. The queen's face froze when she heard this. She clearly understood the implications. That night, a squad of shadow guards slipped out of the capital under cover of darkness. Their leader was a peak-level knight squire, one step below actual knighthood. Every member of the team was at least a low-level knight squire. Their orders reached Charlot territory in 3 days. The capital is thousands of kilometers from the front. Normal cavalry would take a week of non-stop riding. But these weren't normal people. The leader knew the truth. The princess's location had been leaked to enemies by someone close to the king. A Foston princess wandering through hostile Charlot territory was a gift to a dying kingdom desperate for any advantage. And the person behind the leak was almost certainly sleeping in the king's bed. The king also had a mage send a fire transmission to Prince Kensel at the front. The prince was besieging the Charlot capital, Otis City, when the message arrived. His reaction was explosive. He immediately ordered his cavalry regiment to ride back and escort the princess. His generals protested. Pulling the cavalry away from the siege of Otis City could let Charlot's remaining forces escape and drag the war on indefinitely. The kingdom couldn't afford that. The prince drew his sword. This is my sister. Anyone who stops me dies. His personal guards flooded the tent and pointed weapons at the arguing generals. The room went very quiet. Then, one by one, the generals changed their tune. Suddenly, everyone agreed it was a fine idea to send cavalry for the princess. The king intervened through the fading fire transmission. He told Kinsel to send only 1 battalion of cavalry and have nearby units provide support. The war couldn't be delayed. 2 months. The king wanted Faustin's lion banner flying over Otis City's walls within 2 months. Kinsel accepted, barely. But before the transmission ended, the prince looked up at his father's image and said coldly, "If anything happens to Angelina, I will make certain people pay." I didn't know what was happening in the royal palace until much later, when rumors filtered down through the ranks. Apparently, after the king sent out his shadow guards and contacted Prince Kinsel, he stood alone in the great hall for a long time. An old mage, the one who'd maintained the fire transmission, commented that the prince was still hot-tempered. The king sighed and said he owed his children. He was talking about his first wife, Sophia, the mother of both Kinsel and Angelina, his true love. The current queen was just politics. The king understood the bigger picture clearly. Years of war had destroyed the economy. Most nobles were barely holding on. The only real power left in the kingdom was the battle-hardened army at the front, and Prince Kinsel controlled the elite Lion Legion. The queen's little son could never compete with that, even with his uncle Marquis Kent and the whole Legio alliance behind him. Once Faustin absorbed Charlot's territory, the kingdom would be strong enough to make the entire alliance bow.